The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground at Fort Hood, Texas. The light gleamed off the hulking metal beasts arranged in perfect formation, their gun barrels pointing skyward like ancient obelisks. 47 M1A2 Abrams main battle tanks, 68 tons each of American industrial might, waiting in silence. Soon, they would be relegated to history. Colonel James "Iron Jim" Harrington stood alone before them, his weathered face impassive. At 62, his once black hair was now silver, cut in the same military style he'd worn for 4 decades. His spine remained ramrod straight, defying both age and gravity. The early October wind carried the familiar scent of diesel and gun oil that had defined his life. 40 years, 4 decades of service. From the frozen fields of Germany during the Cold War to the burning deserts of Iraq and the mountainous terrain of Afghanistan. Harrington had commanded tanks through it all, earning his nickname Iron Jim, not just for his unbreakable resolve, but for his almost supernatural connection to the steel beasts under his command. He approached the nearest tank, placing his hand on its armored flank. The metal felt warm in the morning sun, almost alive beneath his palm. This particular machine, hull number A231, had been with him through his last deployment to Iraq. They called her Thunderbolt, a name painted in now fading letters on her turret. Saying goodbye to old friends, Harrington didn't turn at the voice. Major General Thomas Reed, base commander, was 15 years his junior, but a good man who understood what these machines meant. Not goodbye, Harrington said, his voice gravelly from years of shouting commands over engine noise. Just paying my respects. They're being decommissioned next week, Reed said, stepping up beside him. Budget cuts, drones and autonomous weapons are the future, they say. They've been saying that since I was a lieutenant. This time they mean it. The Appropriations Committee has spoken. Harrington nodded but said nothing. Politicians and their budgets came and went. The lessons of war remained eternal. Inside his breast pocket was the worn leather journal he'd carried through 4 wars. On its first page, written in his own hand decades ago, not the weapon that decides victory, but the warrior who wields it. His father had told him that, Colonel William Harrington, who'd commanded Sherman tanks across Europe in World War II. The wisdom had been passed down, father to son, warrior to warrior. Your retirement ceremony is scheduled for Friday, Reed said. The Secretary of the Army will be there. I prefer something quieter. 40 years deserve some fanfare, Jim. Harrington finally turned from the tank, squinting against the sun. I served because it was my duty, not for ceremonies. I know, Reed said with a slight smile. That's exactly why you deserve one. As they walked back toward headquarters, Harrington glanced over his shoulder at the silent formation of tanks. In his mind, they weren't just machines. Each had a soul, a personality, a history. Each had carried men into battle, protected them, brought them home, or tried to. The memories came unbidden. Desert Storm 1991. The thunderous advance across the Iraqi desert. 3 of his crew, his friends, lost when an enemy round found its mark. Their names etched forever in his mind. Martinez, Dawson, Williams, young men who never came home. His office was Spartan despite his rank. No plush furniture or expensive decorations, just the essentials and a few mementos. A folded flag in a triangle case. A single row of photographs showing 4 generations of Harrington men in uniform, from his grandfather in World War I to himself in Afghanistan. A framed citation for the Silver Star he had earned in Iraq. On his desk sat a manila folder containing his retirement papers. 40 years distilled into bureaucratic forms and checkboxes. Was this how a warrior's journey ended? With paperwork and a handshake? His phone rang. The base operator informed him that General William Porter was calling from the Pentagon. Harrington frowned. Porter was an old friend from Desert Storm days, now a senior advisor at the Department of Defense. They spoke occasionally, but rarely on official channels. Bill, Harrington said when the call connected, this is a surprise. Jim, Porter's voice sounded older than Harrington remembered. How's retirement looking? Still 4 days away, but the fishing gear is ready. About that, Porter paused. I need you to postpone it. Harrington leaned back in his chair. The Army's had me for 40 years, Bill. I think they can manage without me now. Not for this. Porter's tone shifted, becoming the voice of command Harrington recognized from their days in combat. There's a situation that requires your expertise. 6 months maximum. I've trained good officers. Any one of them could handle whatever this is. It has to be you, Jim. It's about the future of armored warfare itself. Harrington's eyes drifted to the window, where he could see the distant silhouettes of the Abrams tanks scheduled for decommissioning. I'm listening. Not over the phone. I've arranged for a secure briefing at 0800 tomorrow. Joint Readiness Center. After hanging up, Harrington opened his journal and wrote a single line. When you think your war is over, the battle merely changes form. Chapter 2. The Final Mission. The Joint Readiness Center was a modernist concrete structure that always reminded Harrington of a bunker. Inside, past 3 security checkpoints, General Porter waited in a windowless conference room. At 70, Porter was older than Harrington but somehow looked it less, his face remarkably unwrinkled despite decades under desert suns. Only his completely white hair betrayed his age. "Jim," Porter stood and embraced him briefly. "Thank you for coming." "Didn't realize I had a choice," Harrington replied, but without rancor. The room held a large table with 5 other people seated around it. Porter made quick introductions. 2 Army generals Harrington knew by reputation, a civilian from DARPA, and 2 representatives from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. "Colonel Harrington," said one of the OSD representatives, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, "your service record is exemplary. Your experience with armored warfare strategy spans 4 decades in multiple theaters of operation." "I drove tanks and led men who drove tanks," Harrington said plainly. "No need to dress it up." Porter smiled slightly. "This is why we need you, Jim. No bullshit." The lights dimmed and a projection appeared on the wall. Satellite imagery of foreign military installations, followed by intelligence assessments of next-generation battle tanks being developed by potential adversaries. "The T-14 Armada platform has been upgraded," said the DARPA representative. "Our intelligence suggests their newest version incorporates advanced active protection systems and possibly AI-assisted targeting that exceeds our current capabilities." More images followed. Chinese Type 99A tanks with new modifications, experimental European designs, each more advanced than the last. "Meanwhile," Porter continued, "our own armored capabilities are being diminished. Budget constraints, strategic reassessments, the focus on autonomous systems." Harrington watched silently. None of this was surprising. The cycle of military advancement and counter-advancement was as old as warfare itself. "So you want me to assess these threats? Write a report?" Harrington asked. Porter exchanged glances with the others before answering. "Not exactly. We want you to lead Project Sentinel." A new image appeared on the screen, a conceptual design for a ground combat system unlike any Harrington had seen before. "This is a joint initiative between the Army and several defense contractors," explained one of the generals. "The goal is to develop the next generation of American armored warfare capability, something that can counter these emerging threats within our budgetary constraints." Harrington studied the design. It was innovative but clearly preliminary. "You have talented officers who specialize in weapons development. Why me?" Porter leaned forward. "Because the future of American armored warfare is at a crossroads, Jim. There are powerful interests pushing to abandon traditional armored platforms entirely in favor of fully autonomous systems, drones, robots, AI-driven weapons platforms." "The Obsidian Initiative," added the female OSD representative. Porter nodded. "We need someone who understands the irreplaceable human element in armored warfare. Someone who can ensure that whatever we develop doesn't lose the core of what makes our tank corps effective." Harrington looked around the table. "You're telling me that after 40 years of service, my final mission is to save the very concept of tanks in the U.S. Army?" "Not just save it," Porter said gravely. "Reinvent it for the next generation of warfare." The room fell silent as Harrington considered this. Finally, he asked, "When do I start?" "Immediately. You'll be working at the Advanced Combat Systems Development Center at Fort Hood. A team is being assembled." Later that evening, alone in his quarters, Harrington opened his journal again. He sketched the concept vehicle he'd seen, trying to understand its potential. Beneath it, he wrote, "They don't want a new tank. They want a reason to keep tanks at all." He closed the journal and poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon. The truth had been in Porter's eyes, not his words. This wasn't just about developing a new weapons platform. This was a last stand for an entire military tradition, a philosophy of warfare that stretched back a century. And Harrington had been chosen as its defender because he was already scheduled to leave. If the project failed, his reputation alone would take the fall. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Porter, information he hadn't shared in the meeting. "Quantum Defense CEO Vincent Reynolds leads Obsidian Initiative, Marine Vet Iraq. His autonomous systems proposal costs 80% less than conventional force. Congressional Budget Committee already interested. Harrington sipped his bourbon slowly. The real battle was becoming clear. Not against foreign adversaries, but against time, budgets, and changing military doctrine. A battle for the soul of American armored warfare. One last mission, he murmured to himself, one last charge. Chapter 3, Empire of Technology. The Advanced Combat Systems Development Center resembled an industrial park more than a military facility. Located on the outskirts of Fort Hood, its cluster of modern buildings housed some of the most advanced weapons research in the country. Harrington's new office overlooked a massive hangar where prototype vehicles were tested and refined. On his first morning, a young lieutenant escorted him to a secure conference room where his new team waited. The lieutenant spoke nervously, clearly aware of Harrington's reputation. "Everyone's very excited to have you leading this project, sir. Your experience is legendary." Harrington merely nodded. Legends belonged in books. He dealt in reality. The conference room fell silent when he entered. 8 people seated around a table, a mix of military and civilian personnel. At the head of the table stood a woman in her mid-40s with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, Dr. Elaine Winters, according to the briefing Porter had sent. "Colonel Harrington," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome to Project Sentinel. I'm the lead engineer." Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. Harrington appreciated both. "Dr. Winters, I look forward to working with you." She introduced the others quickly: 2 Army engineers, a weapons systems specialist, a software developer, a logistics officer, and a young woman who specialized in human-machine interface design. "We also have virtual team members at Aberdeen Proving Ground and Fort Benning," Winters added. "And of course, liaisons with our industrial partners." "Speaking of partners," Harrington said, taking a seat, "I understand quantum defense is involved in a competing project." A flicker of tension crossed Winters' face. "Yes, the Obsidian Initiative, though competing might not be the right word. The DoD considers them complementary approaches." "And in your professional opinion?" Winters hesitated, glancing at the others. "Obsidian represents a significant technological leap. Fully autonomous ground combat systems operated remotely or by AI, no human operators in the vehicle. Removing soldiers from the battlefield has obvious appeal," said one of the Army engineers. "Politically and from a casualty prevention standpoint." Harrington nodded. "I'd like a full briefing on Obsidian. Know your enemy." "They're not the enemy, Colonel," Winters said carefully. "In fact, their CEO is visiting today for a joint systems review." Before Harrington could respond, the door opened. A man in his early 40s entered, dressed in an expensive suit that didn't quite hide his military bearing. His smile revealed perfect teeth, and his handshake as he approached Harrington was calculated in its firmness. "Colonel Harrington," he said, "Vincent Reynolds, CEO of Quantum Defense. It's an honor to meet a living legend." Harrington assessed him quickly. Fit, confident, with the intensity of someone who had seen combat but the polish of someone who had left it far behind. "Mr. Reynolds, I've heard much about your work." "All good, I hope," Reynolds said, taking a seat without waiting for an invitation. "I understand you'll be overseeing Project Sentinel. I look forward to sharing insights between our teams." "Sentinel and Obsidian have different design philosophies," Winters interjected, "but certain technologies might benefit both platforms." Reynolds nodded. "Exactly, though I should be transparent, Colonel. I believe the future of combat is autonomous. Removing human operators from combat vehicles isn't just safer, it's more effective. Machines don't get tired, don't get scared, don't make emotional decisions," Harrington acknowledged. "But they also don't have intuition. Don't understand terrain the way a veteran tanker does. Can't read a battlefield's subtle cues." "That's where you're behind the curve, Colonel." Reynolds leaned forward, his voice taking on the quality of a sales pitch. "Our neurobiomimic processing systems can analyze battlefield conditions 200 times faster than human reflexes. They can integrate data from hundreds of sensors simultaneously, predict enemy movements based on microscopic terrain variations, and coordinate with other autonomous systems in ways human teams simply cannot. And when the enemy jams your signals, deploys EMP weapons, hacks your systems," Reynolds smiled, "we have addressed those vulnerabilities extensively. I'd be happy to have my technical team brief yours on our countermeasures." The meeting continued for another hour, with Reynolds presenting impressive simulations of Obsidian's capabilities. The autonomous tank prototype his company had developed could indeed outperform human crews in controlled tests. Its targeting systems were faster, its tactical decisions more consistent, its coordination with other units flawless. After Reynolds left, Harrington remained with Winters and her team. The room felt lighter somehow, as if Reynolds had taken some of the oxygen with him. Impressive technology, Harrington admitted, but I noticed he didn't address the cost. Winters nodded. Each Obsidian unit costs approximately $6.2 million, significantly less than the $10 million for a new Abrams, and they require no human crew, reducing personnel costs dramatically. And Sentinel? Our target is $7.5 million per unit, with a crew of 2 instead of 4. But we're emphasizing adaptability, battlefield survivability under adverse conditions, and the human element in decision-making. Harrington stood and walked to the window, looking out at the testing grounds where prototype vehicles were being put through their paces. Dr. Winters, I'd like a complete technical briefing on Sentinel's current design status. Then I want to review every piece of data we have on actual tank warfare from Desert Storm forward. May I ask why, Colonel? Harrington turned back to her. Because Mr. Reynolds has never actually fought in a tank. His simulations are impressive, but they're based on ideal conditions. I want to see how both systems might perform when everything goes wrong. Because in combat, it always does. Chapter 4. The Forgotten Archive. 3 days into his new assignment, Harrington discovered that the Development Center housed an extensive archive of armored warfare documentation dating back to World War I. The facility had originally been established in the 1950s as a research center for tank development, and decades of reports, analyses, and classified assessments had accumulated in its basement. Most of these documents had been digitized, but the original papers remained in acid-free boxes on metal shelves in a climate-controlled room that smelled faintly of dust and old paper. It was here, among the forgotten wisdom of previous generations, that Harrington spent his evenings after the regular staff had gone home. He had requested specific files, after-action reports from tank battalions in Desert Storm, Iraq, and Afghanistan, analysis of armored warfare in urban environments, studies on crew performance under combat stress, and historical assessments of tank development from other nations. On his third night in the archives, he found a report he hadn't requested. It had been misfiled, tucked between analyses of Soviet tank tactics and American counter-strategies from the Cold War era. The cover bore a simple title, The Sturmgeschütz III, Lessons from Adaptive Design Under Constraint. The report, prepared by Army Intelligence in 1955, contained a detailed analysis of Germany's most successful armored vehicle of World War II. Not the famous Tiger or Panther tanks that dominated popular imagination, but the humble Sturmgeschütz, or Stu-G, a low-profile assault gun built on a tank chassis. Harrington read with growing interest. The Stu-G had begun as an infantry support vehicle designed to provide direct fire support for advancing troops. But as the war progressed and Germany faced material shortages and changing battlefield conditions, the Stu-G was adapted into an effective tank destroyer. By war's end, Stu-Gs had destroyed more Allied tanks than all other German armored vehicles combined. What made the Stu-G remarkable was not its technical sophistication but its pragmatic design. It was cheaper to produce than conventional tanks, required fewer resources, and could be manufactured quickly. Its low profile made it excellent for ambush tactics, and its simplified design meant it was more reliable under battlefield conditions. Harrington copied several pages of the report and continued his search. As dawn approached, he discovered another file that caught his attention. Alternative Armored Vehicle Concepts, 1985 to 1990. Inside was a design study for a light mobile tank destroyer with a low profile and reduced crew requirements. The concept had been rejected in favor of continuing development on the Abrams platform. One name on the design team stood out, Major William Harrington, his father. Harrington stared at the signature, memories flooding back. His father had indeed worked on special projects at Aberdeen Proving Ground in the late 1980s, but he'd never discussed the details with his son. Now, looking at the designs, Harrington could see the parallels to the Stu-G concept. His father had proposed a modern version of the adaptive, economical design that had proven so effective for the Germans. But the Army, flush with Cold War funding and focused on matching Soviet heavy tanks, had shelved the concept. They wanted the biggest, most powerful main battle tank money could buy. The Abrams was the result, and it had indeed proven formidable in conventional tank warfare. Harrington carefully photographed the entire file with his secure tablet, then returned both reports to their places. As he left the archive, the morning sun was just beginning to illuminate the Texas landscape. His mind raced with connections and possibilities. Back in his quarters, he spread the materials across his desk and began to sketch. The WWII concept, his father's designs, and elements of the Sentinel project began to merge in his mind. What if the answer wasn't trying to build a better Abrams? What if it was building something fundamentally different? Something that acknowledged the realities of modern warfare and budget constraints? He worked through the morning, missing his scheduled meetings, ignoring calls from Dr. Winters. By noon, he had the outline of a concept that excited him more than anything had in years. A ground combat system that combined the best elements of traditional armored vehicles with new technology, but reimagined for contemporary battlefield conditions. When he finally answered his phone, Dr. Winters sounded concerned. "Colonel, is everything all right? You missed the systems integration review." "I need you to come to my quarters," Harrington said, "and bring your best engineer. I think I've found our direction." An hour later, Winters arrived with Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen, a young naval engineer assigned to the project. Chen's expertise was in systems integration, particularly the interface between human operators and computerized systems. Harrington had tacked his sketches and notes to the wall, creating an impromptu display. "What do you see?" he asked as they entered. Winters studied the materials carefully. "These look like German assault guns from World War II, the WWII. And this?" Harrington pointed to his father's designs. "A similar concept, but modernized," Chen observed. "Low profile, reduced crew, emphasis on firepower over protection. A tank destroyer rather than a true tank." "Exactly," Harrington said. "We've been thinking about Sentinel as a replacement for the Abrams, a main battle tank with all the same capabilities. But what if that's the wrong approach entirely?" Winters frowned. "The requirement specification calls for—" "The requirements were written by committee," Harrington interrupted, "by people trying to justify the continued existence of traditional armored forces without understanding what makes them effective." He pointed to his new sketches. "What if Sentinel isn't a tank at all? What if it's a completely new category of armored vehicle designed specifically for the realities of modern warfare? Lower cost, smaller crew, emphasis on survivability and combat effectiveness rather than raw power." Chen leaned closer to the sketches. "A hybrid approach. The human decision-making capabilities Reynolds dismisses, but with advanced system support, not replacing the human element, but enhancing it." "You're talking about a fundamental redesign," Winter said cautiously. "The program timeline doesn't allow for—" "The timeline is meaningless if we deliver the wrong vehicle," Harrington countered. "Reynolds is right about one thing. The future isn't just more of the same. But he's wrong that humans are the weakness in the system. They're the strength when properly supported by technology." Winters studied Harrington's face. "You really believe this is the right direction?" "I do, and I think I can convince Porter and the Oversight Committee, but I need your help to develop the concept properly." After a moment's consideration, Winters nodded. "It's bold, but I can see the potential. We'll need to run simulations, develop proper specifications, build a prototype eventually." "We'll need more than that," Harrington said grimly. "We'll need to prove that this concept is superior to Obsidian under realistic combat conditions. Reynolds won't give up his advantage easily." As they began to work through the details, Harrington's phone rang again. It was Porter. "Jim," his old friend said without preamble, "I've just come from a meeting with the Appropriations Committee. Reynolds made his pitch for Obsidian today. He's proposing to replace our entire tank force with autonomous units at 40% of the current operating cost. And they were impressed. Very impressed. He had senators practically salivating over the budget savings. More importantly, he had combat footage." Harrington frowned. "Combat footage? Obsidian hasn't been deployed." "Field tests designed to simulate combat conditions. Very convincing demonstrations of Obsidian units outperforming crude tanks in every scenario. Jim, they're fast-tracking his proposal. If Sentinel doesn't show comparable results within 90 days, they're redirecting all funding to Obsidian." Harrington looked at Winters and Chen, who had heard enough to understand the situation. "Tell the committee we'll be ready," he said firmly. "Sentinel will demonstrate capabilities Obsidian can't match." After hanging up, he turned to his new allies. "It seems we have a deadline, 90 days to reinvent American armored warfare." Chapter 5, The Hard Choice. The next morning, Harrington called a full-team meeting at the development center. The conference room was packed, not just with the core Sentinel team, but with additional engineers, tacticians, and support staff. The energy was palpable, a mix of excitement and apprehension. Our mission has changed, Harrington announced without preamble. We have 90 days to develop, build, and demonstrate a prototype of the Sentinel system, or the program will be terminated. Murmurs spread through the room. 90 days was an impossible timeline for developing a new armored vehicle. Traditional development cycles took years, sometimes decades. Furthermore, Harrington continued, we're changing our approach fundamentally. Sentinel will not be a traditional main battle tank. It will be a new class of armored combat system, emphasizing crew survivability, tactical flexibility, and cost efficiency. He unveiled the concept sketches he, Winters, and Chen had refined overnight. The new Sentinel design featured a low profile, similar to the World War II Stu-G, but thoroughly modernized. Instead of a traditional rotating turret, it used a fixed main gun in a limited traverse mount, supplemented by remotely operated weapon systems. The crew compartment was smaller, designed for 2 operators instead of 4, with advanced digital systems providing the capabilities traditionally requiring additional crew members. This approach reduces our profile, weight, and cost, while maintaining combat effectiveness, Harrington explained. It also allows us to incorporate advanced automation and AI support systems without removing human judgment from the battlefield. Dr. Winters stepped forward. The key technological innovation will be our human-machine combat interface. Unlike Obsidian, which replaces human operators with AI, Sentinel will use AI to enhance human capabilities. The system learns from crew decisions, anticipates needs, and handles routine tasks while leaving critical decisions to the operators. This is a radical departure from the original specifications, objected one of the military engineers. The Oversight Committee expected a next-generation main battle tank. The Oversight Committee expected a viable alternative to Obsidian, Harrington countered. This is it, a system that incorporates the best of both traditional armored warfare and autonomous systems. The debate continued for hours. Technical feasibility, production timelines, testing requirements, every aspect was scrutinized and challenged. By midday, the room had divided into factions, those who saw the potential in Harrington's new approach, and those who believed it was too risky a deviation from established doctrine. Colonel, said Major Lewis, the project's military liaison, even if we agree this is the right approach, 90 days is impossible. We need time for design, fabrication, testing, refinement. We don't have time, Harrington replied firmly. Reynolds is moving aggressively, and he has congressional support. Sentinel delivers a viable alternative in 90 days, or armored warfare as we know it ends. There is another option, Lewis suggested hesitantly. We could compromise. Incorporate some of Quantum's autonomous technologies into a more traditional design. Reynolds has indicated he's open to collaboration. Harrington shook his head. That's not a compromise, it's surrender. Reynolds doesn't want to improve tanks. He wants to eliminate the human element entirely. His vision is fundamentally different from ours. As the meeting approached its third hour, the door opened unexpectedly. Vincent Reynolds entered, flanked by 2 of his company executives. His timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Someone had informed him of the meeting. Colonel Harrington, Reynolds said with a practiced smile, I hope I'm not interrupting. I was in the building for a technology demonstration and heard you were discussing the future of Sentinel. Harrington kept his expression neutral. Reynolds, this is a closed project meeting. Of course, and I apologize for the intrusion, but given the recent interest from the Appropriations Committee and potential collaboration between our projects, I thought a brief discussion might be valuable. Reynolds approached the display where Harrington's concept sketches were visible. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied them. Interesting approach, he said finally. A return to the assault gun concept, low profile, fixed gun, very retro. Sometimes the past has lessons for the future, Harrington replied evenly. Reynolds turned to address the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I respect the Colonel's experience immensely, but we must ask ourselves if looking backward is really the best approach for America's defense needs. He activated his tablet, projecting a holographic display of the Obsidian system in the center of the room. The sleek, unmanned vehicle rotated slowly, its specifications appearing alongside it. Obsidian represents a true generational leap. No crew compartment means reduced weight, smaller target profile, and enhanced survivability. Its neural network processing can identify and engage targets faster than human reflexes allow. And most importantly, it keeps American soldiers out of harm's way entirely. Until the enemy deploys countermeasures specifically designed to disrupt autonomous systems, Harrington noted. Electronic warfare, targeted EMP weapons, environment manipulation, all of which we've anticipated and designed against, Reynolds countered smoothly. Colonel, with respect, the battlefield has changed. Today's wars are fought with precision, not mass. Information dominance, not brute force. Obsidian is built for that reality. Wars change, Mr. Reynolds. Warriors don't. The human element remains constant. Reynolds smiled thinly. A philosophical difference, perhaps, but one the Appropriations Committee will need to evaluate in terms of lives and dollars saved. He turned to Dr. Winters. Elaine, your work on human-machine interfaces is groundbreaking. I'd be very interested in discussing how it might complement Obsidian systems. Perhaps over dinner? Before Winters could respond, Harrington stepped forward. Mr. Reynolds, this remains a classified project meeting. Unless you have security clearance specific to Sentinel, I must ask you to leave. For a moment, tension filled the room. Then Reynolds nodded amiably. Of course, Colonel. Protocol is important. I'll see myself out. But my offer stands for anyone interested in discussing the future rather than the past. After Reynolds left, the room remained silent for several seconds. Finally, Chen spoke. He knew about our design change. Someone told him. Harrington surveyed the room, meeting each person's eyes briefly. Security has just become our top priority. From this moment forward, all Sentinel materials are classified. No discussions outside this team. No accessing files from unsecured systems. Major Lewis looked troubled. Colonel, Reynolds has powerful allies. Pushing back against him directly could jeopardize the entire project. I'm not interested in politics, Major. I'm interested in providing our soldiers with the best possible equipment. If you're uncomfortable with that mission, now is the time to request reassignment. Lewis straightened. No, sir. I'm committed to the project. Good. Harrington turned to the entire team. We have 90 days to design, build, and demonstrate a vehicle that will determine the future of American armored warfare. It will require extraordinary effort from every person in this room. He paused, looking at each of them again. What we're proposing isn't just a new vehicle. It's a new philosophy of warfare, one that respects the irreplaceable value of human judgment while embracing technological advancement. If you believe in that vision, I need your absolute commitment now. One by one, the team members nodded or voiced their support. Even those who had expressed doubts earlier seemed to recognize the gravity of the moment. Dr. Winters will oversee technical development, Harrington continued. Commander Chen will lead the human-machine interface team. Major Lewis, you'll handle logistics and security. I want preliminary designs ready for review in 72 hours, a functional prototype in 45 days, and a field-ready demonstration vehicle in 85 days. The impossibility of the timeline hung in the air, but no one objected. There was a sense that they were part of something historic, a last stand for a tradition of warfare stretching back a century. As the meeting broke up and people dispersed to their assignments, Winters approached Harrington. Reynolds will fight us every step of the way, she said quietly, and he fights dirty. I'm counting on it, Harrington replied. When a man like that feels threatened, he makes mistakes. What about Porter? Will he support our new approach? Harrington considered this. Porter understands what's at stake. He'll support us officially. Unofficially, he'll keep his options open. Later that night, alone in his quarters, Harrington opened his journal. He sketched the new Sentinel concept, refining details as he thought through the challenges ahead. Beneath it, he wrote, "Sometimes victory requires retreat before advance. We step backward to move forward." The Stoogie wasn't a compromise, it was an evolution. On the next page, he wrote a list of names. People he trusted implicitly, veterans with specialized skills who might join the project. People who understood that warfare wasn't just about technology, but about the warriors who employed it. His phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from an unknown number, but the content made the sender clear. Discovered your father's design files have been accessed from quantum servers. Reynolds purchased all rights to the 1985 study 3 years ago. He's been suppressing alternative designs while developing Obsidian. Watch your back. Not everyone on your team is loyal. Harrington stared at the message for a long time. Reynolds hadn't just happened upon the Sentinel project. He'd been planning to eliminate it from the beginning. which meant the 90-day deadline wasn't just a challenge, it was a trap designed to ensure failure. The realization didn't discourage Harrington, it energized him. This wasn't just about tanks anymore, it was about integrity, about honoring the warriors who came before and those who would follow, about ensuring that in the rush toward technological advancement, the human element wasn't sacrificed. He closed his journal and stood at the window, looking out at the distant lights of Fort Hood. Somewhere out there, the future of American armored warfare would be decided, not by committees or corporations, but by the men and women who had the courage to stand for something more important than profit or political advantage. One last battle, Harrington murmured to himself. Make it count. Dawn broke over Fort Hood as Harrington stood in the massive vehicle bay that had been allocated to Project Sentinel. The cavernous space, once used to service entire battalions of Abrams tanks, now felt eerily empty with just the skeletal beginnings of their prototype taking shape in the center. Metal framework and component systems lay organized on workbenches around the perimeter, waiting to be assembled. Harrington checked his watch. 5:30 in the morning. Most of the team wouldn't arrive for another 2 hours, but he preferred these quiet moments to think, to plan, to remember why this fight mattered. The heavy metal door at the far end of the bay groaned open. Dr. Winters entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She looked surprised to see him. "You're here early, Colonel." "Never left," Harrington admitted, accepting the coffee she offered. "Had some thoughts about the power distribution system I wanted to sketch out." Winters nodded, not commenting on the dark circles under his eyes. 2 weeks into their 90-day deadline, everyone was pushing their limits. "The materials for this composite armor are delayed again," she said instead. "Reynolds has connections with the supplier. They claim production issues, but it's sabotage," Harrington finished. "Expected. We adapt." He led her to a drafting table where technical drawings were spread out. "I've been thinking about alternative armor configurations. If we can't get the composites, we go with a different approach. Reactive armor panels over a steel base. Old school, but effective." "That adds weight," Winters noted. "Affects mobility, power requirements. We compensate by reducing armor in non-critical areas. The Stu-G taught us that you don't need equal protection everywhere." Winters studied the drawings. Despite their adversarial beginning, she'd come to respect Harrington's technical understanding. Behind his gruff exterior was a methodical engineer's mind, honed by decades of practical experience. "It could work," she conceded. "I'll have the team run simulations." The door opened again and Commander Marcus Chen entered. At 35, Chen was the youngest senior member of the project, a combat veteran who'd lost his right leg below the knee in Iraq. The advanced prosthetic allowed him to walk normally, but Harrington had noticed he still favored his left side after long days. "Morning, Colonel Doctor." Chen nodded, his eyes immediately going to their prototype. "Any progress on the interface systems?" "That's your department, Commander," Harrington replied. "And it would be moving faster if we had the processing units I requested 3 days ago," Chen said with a hint of frustration. Another unexplained delay from procurement. Harrington frowned. Reynolds' influence was more pervasive than he'd anticipated. "I'll make some calls. In the meantime, focus on the software architecture. We'll get the hardware." By 8 o'clock, the bay had filled with activity as engineers, technicians, and military personnel arrived to begin their work. The core team now numbered 27, with additional support staff rotating in as needed. Despite the obvious talent assembled, Harrington felt they were still missing crucial pieces. At 9, he gathered everyone for the daily briefing. Progress reports were delivered, challenges identified, tasks assigned. The routine had become essential as they worked against the impossible deadline. "We've solved the power distribution issue," reported one of the electrical engineers. "But the thermal management system is still problematic. The compact design creates heat concentration that could affect system reliability under combat conditions. And the targeting system integration is behind schedule," added another team member. "Without the specialized processors, we're limited in our development environment." Harrington listened to each report carefully. The obstacles were mounting, many traceable to Reynolds' interference. Equipment delays, supply chain issues, even reassignment of key personnel to other projects. They were being systematically undercut. As the meeting concluded, Harrington made a decision. "Dr. Winters, Commander Chen, Major Lewis, my office, 10 minutes." His office was a repurposed storage room adjacent to the vehicle bay. No windows, just concrete walls covered with project plans and technical diagrams. The three team leaders filed in, closing the heavy door behind them. "We need to expand the team," Harrington said without preamble. "Specifically, we need people outside the regular channels, people Reynolds can't influence." "You have someone in mind," Winters observed. "Several someones." Harrington handed each of them a file. "These are former colleagues, specialists in various fields, all retired or working in the private sector now, all trustworthy." Chen opened his file, scanning the contents. Calvin Washington, former Master Sergeant, tank mechanic with 30 years experience, retired 5 years ago. "Best damn mechanic in the Armored Corps," Harrington confirmed. "Kept our tanks running during Desert Storm with nothing but basic tools and determination. Currently works at a custom motorcycle shop in San Antonio." Major Lewis frowned. "Calvin Washington? Wasn't he court-martialed for striking an officer?" "Charges dropped," Harrington clarified. "The officer was a second lieutenant who ordered unsafe field repairs that would have endangered his crew." Winters was reviewing her file. "Sarah Harrington, mechanical engineer specializing in robotics, currently with Boston Dynamics." She looked up sharply. "Any relation?" "My daughter," Harrington acknowledged. Chen raised an eyebrow. "You want to bring your daughter onto a classified military project?" "I want the best robotics engineer available," Harrington corrected. "Family connection is irrelevant." The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone understood the unspoken implications. Bringing in outside personnel, especially retired military and civilians, would require special authorization. It would attract attention from the Oversight Committee, potentially creating new opportunities for Reynolds to interfere. "These people aren't cleared for this level of classified work," Lewis pointed out. "I can get them cleared," Harrington replied. "Porter still has enough influence for that." "And if he refuses?" Harrington's expression hardened. "Then we proceed with the team we have and work twice as hard. But we need these specialists, Major. Washington knows tank systems better than anyone alive. My daughter pioneered adaptive robotic response algorithms that could solve our interface challenges. The others bring equally critical skills." After a long moment, Winters nodded. "I agree. We need them. The technical challenges we're facing require specialized knowledge we don't currently have." "The timeline doesn't allow for a learning curve," Chen added. "Having experts who can hit the ground running would be invaluable." Lewis still looked uncomfortable. "And what happens when Reynolds discovers we've brought in ringers? He has allies throughout the chain of command." "Let me worry about Reynolds," Harrington said. "Your job is to ensure our current team maintains operational security. No discussions outside this facility, no digital communications about the project on unsecured networks." 3 days later, Calvin Washington arrived at Fort Hood, driving a meticulously restored 1969 Ford Mustang that rumbled into the parking lot outside the development center. At 68, the former Master Sergeant remained powerfully built, his dark skin weathered by decades under desert suns. His salt and pepper beard was precisely trimmed, and he walked with the measured cadence of a career soldier. Harrington met him at the security checkpoint, something he wouldn't normally do for a new team member. But Washington wasn't ordinary personnel. "Master Sergeant," Harrington extended his hand. "Just Calvin now, Colonel," Washington replied, his handshake firm. "Left the stripes behind when I turned in my tags." "Appreciated you coming on such short notice." Washington shrugged. "When James Harrington calls and says he needs help saving tanks from extinction, a man pays attention." They had served together in Desert Storm, Harrington as a young captain, Washington as the senior NCO who kept their company's tanks operational through dust storms, enemy fire, and logistical nightmares. They had developed a mutual respect that transcended rank. "The situation is complicated," Harrington explained as they walked toward the vehicle bay. "We're developing an alternative to fully autonomous combat systems. A hybrid that preserves the human element while incorporating advanced technology. And someone powerful doesn't want you to succeed," Washington guessed. "Same old Army politics, different decade." "Something like that." The security door to the vehicle bay required both keycard and biometric verification. Inside, the prototype had progressed significantly since Harrington's early morning assessment. The basic hull structure was now complete, with various systems being integrated into the chassis. Team members moved purposefully around the vehicle, focused on their specialized tasks. Washington stopped, taking in the scene with a practiced eye. His gaze settled on the prototype, and his expression shifted from curiosity to understanding. "It's a modern Stu-G," he said quietly. "Fixed casemate, low profile, emphasis on firepower and protection over mobility. Smart. Harrington nodded. You see it? I see more than that. I see you're building a tank killer, not a tank. Something that can fight from defensive positions, support infantry, engages other armored vehicles from optimal ranges. Washington circled the prototype slowly. But with modern fire control, digital systems, advanced mobility, very smart. Can you help us build it? Washington ran his hand along the partially completed hull, feeling the quality of the welds, assessing the structural integrity. Your engine mounting brackets are wrong. Power plant this size will shake them loose in under 50 hours of operation. Transmission cooling system is inadequate. And your track tensioning mechanism is overcomplicated. He turned to Harrington with a slight smile. But yes, Colonel, I can help you build it. Washington was immediately assigned to oversee the mechanical systems integration. His decades of hands-on experience with armored vehicles proved invaluable as they worked to resolve the numerous engineering challenges of their unconventional design. 2 days later, Sarah Harrington arrived. At 38, she had her father's intensity, but little of his military bearing. Her brown hair was streaked with premature gray, and she carried herself with the slightly hunched posture of someone who spent too many hours at computer workstations. Father and daughter greeted each other with awkward formality at the same security checkpoint. Thank you for coming, Harrington said stiffly. Your message said it was important, she replied, though you were characteristically vague about the details. Their relationship had been strained since her mother's death 15 years earlier. Harrington's constant deployments had left Sarah largely raised by her mother, and when cancer took Elizabeth Harrington, Sarah had blamed her father for the years of absence. His subsequent immersion in military duties only widened the gulf between them. It is important, Harrington confirmed. Possibly the most important project I've ever worked on. As they walked to the vehicle bay, he explained the Sentinel program and its significance. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression revealing neither interest nor dismissal. So you're fighting to preserve the role of humans in warfare, she said finally. Ironic, given how little time you've spent with your actual family. Harrington absorbed the barb without visible reaction. This isn't about me, Sarah. It's about ensuring that critical military decisions remain in human hands. About the ethical implications of fully autonomous weapon systems. And you think I care about military ethics because you've spent your career developing robots that assist humans, not replace them. Your publications on human-machine partnerships suggest you understand the value of keeping humans in the loop. Sarah seemed surprised that he was familiar with her work. You've read my research? Every paper, Harrington acknowledged. Your approach to adaptive interface design could be exactly what we need for Sentinel. When they entered the vehicle bay, Dr. Winters was waiting to give Sarah a technical briefing on the project. The two women walked toward a computer station, already deep in conversation about neural interface architecture and haptic feedback systems. Harrington watched them go, sensing a missed opportunity for connection, but unsure how to bridge the gap. His strength had always been in leading men into battle, not in personal relationships. She's brilliant, Washington said, appearing at Harrington's side, just like her mother was. Yes, Harrington agreed softly, just like Elizabeth. By the end of the week, all of Harrington's specialists had joined the project. Beyond Washington and Sarah, they included a former Air Force targeting systems expert, a civilian AI developer who had worked on DARPA projects, and a retired Marine Corps communications specialist. Each brought unique skills that addressed specific challenges facing the Sentinel prototype. With these additions, progress accelerated dramatically. Washington's mechanical expertise solved persistent problems with the powertrain and suspension systems. Sarah's innovative approach to human-machine interfaces revolutionized the crew control systems. The other specialists contributed equally valuable improvements in their areas of expertise. But with progress came increased scrutiny. Major Lewis reported that questions were being raised at the Pentagon about the project's expanded personnel roster. Reynolds had lodged a formal complaint about irregular staffing procedures and security concerns with the Oversight Committee. He's laying groundwork, Harrington told his senior team during a private meeting, creating a paper trail he can use later to discredit our results. Then we need to be completely above board, Lewis insisted. Everything documented, every procedure followed to the letter. Agreed, but we also need to accelerate our timeline. The longer this takes, the more opportunities Reynolds has to interfere. The team redoubled their efforts. Work continued around the clock. with team members often sleeping on cots in the facility rather than returning to their quarters. The prototype took shape rapidly, evolving from a basic hull structure to a fully integrated combat system. 45 days into their 90-day deadline, they conducted their first systems test. The prototype, now designated XM-167 Sentinel, was moved to an enclosed testing range where its propulsion, targeting, and communication systems could be evaluated in controlled conditions. Harrington, Winters, and Chen observed from a monitoring station as Washington and a test engineer operated the vehicle through a series of basic maneuvers. The Sentinel moved smoothly across the test course, its innovative hybrid electric-diesel power system functioning exactly as designed. Power curve is optimal, Winters noted, studying the telemetry data. Fuel efficiency is 32% better than the Abrams. Suspension performance is excellent, Chen added. The adaptive dampening system is compensating for terrain variations better than projected. Harrington watched the video feed intently. The Sentinel's low profile and angular hull design gave it a predatory appearance as it navigated the course. It looked nothing like traditional American tanks, more reminiscent of its Stu G ancestor than the massive Abrams. Targeting systems test is next, Winters said. Washington is bringing it into position now. On the test range, the Sentinel aligned itself with a series of targets at varying distances. Its main gun, a 120mm smoothbore and a limited traverse mount, adjusted with precise movements. Firing simulation in 3, 2, 1, Chen counted down. On the screen, data flashed as the targeting computers calculated firing solutions and the gun's simulated recoil without actually firing. Hit probability percentages appeared for each target: 98.7%, 97.4%, 99.1%. Accuracy exceeds specifications, Winters noted with satisfaction. The stabilization system is performing better than expected. The test continued for another hour, evaluating each of the Sentinel's primary systems under various operating conditions. When it was complete, the team gathered in the monitoring station to review the results. Overall performance is excellent, Winters summarized. Propulsion, targeting, and basic control systems all meet or exceed design parameters. The human-machine interface is still lagging, Chen noted. Response times are good, but the predictive algorithms need refinement. Sarah's working on that, Harrington said. She thinks she can improve the neural mapping by incorporating feedback from actual combat veterans, training the system to recognize operator intent based on subtle control inputs. Washington joined them, still wearing the specialized interface suit that allowed him to operate the prototype. Despite his age, he moved with the energy of a much younger man, invigorated by the challenge. She handles beautifully, he reported. Better weight distribution than any tank I've ever driven. The electric drive gives you immediate torque, no transmission lag. And the visibility from the crew positions is outstanding with those panoramic displays. Any issues? Harrington asked. Minor stuff. Some vibration in the right track assembly above 30 miles per hour. Communication system had a slight delay during directional changes, nothing we can't fix. As they discussed the test results, Major Lewis entered the monitoring station. His expression was grave. Colonel, we have a situation. General Porter is here with representatives from the Oversight Committee. They're demanding an immediate demonstration. Harrington frowned. The prototype isn't ready for official evaluation. We still have systems integration to complete. They're insisting. Reynolds is with them. The group exchanged concerned glances. This was the moment they had feared, an attempt to force a premature evaluation that would highlight the prototype's unfinished elements rather than its innovations. How much time do we have? Harrington asked. They're at the main entrance now. Security called for instructions. Harrington considered their options quickly. Dr. Winters, prepare a technical briefing highlighting our progress to date. Emphasize the systems that are functioning properly. Be transparent about what's still in development. Commander Chen, work with Washington to prepare the prototype for a limited demonstration. Basic mobility and targeting only. Nothing that would stress the unfinished systems. Major Lewis, escort our visitors to the conference room. Offer refreshments, standard protocol. Buy us 20 minutes if you can. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Harrington remained in the monitoring station for a moment, collecting his thoughts. This premature inspection could derail the entire project if handled poorly. Reynolds would be looking for any weakness, any excuse to recommend termination. His phone vibrated with an incoming message. It was from Porter. Reynolds pushed for this inspection, Claims security concerns about your off-roster personnel. Be careful, Jim. Committee members already have doubts. Harrington slipped the phone into his pocket and straightened his uniform. Time to face the enemy on the battlefield of politics and perception. Not his preferred terrain, but one he would navigate nonetheless. For the Sentinel and for the future of American armored warfare, he would find a way to prevail. Chapter 7. Wounds that don't heal. The conference room felt too small for the assemblage of military and civilian officials seated around the table. General Porter sat at one end, his expression carefully neutral as he introduced the Oversight Committee members. 3 civilian officials from the Department of Defense, 2 Army generals Harrington didn't know personally, and Vincent Reynolds, who didn't bother to hide his satisfied smile. Colonel Harrington, Porter began formally, the committee has requested this unscheduled evaluation due to concerns about project security and adherence to established development protocols. I understand, General, Harrington replied, though I must note that the prototype is still in early development. We're at day 45 of our 90-day timeline. Precisely the concern, Colonel, said one of the civilian officials, a sharp-featured woman with steel-rimmed glasses. Accelerated development often leads to oversight lapses. Mr. Reynolds has brought specific concerns to our attention. Reynolds leaned forward, his expression one of practiced concern. Colonel, I have the utmost respect for your military service, but reports indicate you've brought unauthorized personnel onto a highly classified project, including civilians without proper security clearance. All personnel have received appropriate clearances, Harrington countered. General Porter can confirm this. Porter nodded. The additional personnel were cleared through my office. Proper protocols were followed. The issue isn't just clearance, Reynolds persisted. It's the irregular nature of the staffing. Project Sentinel was allocated specific military and contractor personnel. Bringing in retired soldiers and civilian specialists represents a significant deviation from approved procedures. A deviation necessitated by the compressed timeline, Dr. Winters interjected. She had entered silently during the exchange, carrying tablets loaded with technical data. The 90-day development window requires specialized expertise that wasn't available within the original team structure. She distributed the tablets to each committee member. If you'll review these materials, you'll see our current progress and the critical contributions made by each specialist we brought onto the team. The committee members began reviewing the data, their expressions varying from interest to skepticism. One of the generals, a heavy-set man with a perpetual frown, looked up at Harrington. You've significantly altered the original design concept, he noted. This isn't the next-generation main battle tank specified in the requirements document. The requirements document called for a ground combat system capable of countering emerging threats while maintaining American technological superiority, Harrington replied. The Sentinel design fulfills those requirements through innovation rather than iteration. It looks like a modernized assault gun, the general said bluntly. Because that's exactly what it is, Harrington confirmed without apology. A combat system optimized for the realities of modern warfare. Lower profile, reduced crew requirements, enhanced survivability, and comparable firepower to current main battle tanks at significantly lower cost. Reynolds smiled thinly. A fascinating history lesson, Colonel. But modern warfare isn't fought with updated World War II concepts. The battlefield has evolved. Autonomous systems, network-centric warfare, standoff engagement, all of which Sentinel incorporates, Winters countered, but with the critical addition of human judgment in the decision loop. The debate continued for nearly an hour, with Reynolds repeatedly highlighting perceived shortcomings in the Sentinel approach, while Harrington and Winters defended their design philosophy. The committee members remained largely non-committal, asking occasional technical questions, but revealing little about their inclinations. Finally, Porter intervened. I think it's time we see the prototype itself. Colonel, is the vehicle available for inspection? A limited demonstration, yes, Harrington agreed. Commander Chen has prepared the prototype for basic mobility and systems evaluation. The group relocated to the test range where the Sentinel waited in the center of the course. Even in its unfinished state, the vehicle presented an imposing silhouette, its angular armor and low profile giving it a distinctly predatory appearance. Chen stood nearby, monitoring systems from a portable control station. XM-167, Sentinel, Harrington announced formally. A next-generation ground combat system designed for integrated operations with infantry, aerial assets, and autonomous support units. The committee members circled the vehicle, examining its construction and design features. Washington remained in the commander's position inside, ready to demonstrate the prototype's capabilities. The Sentinel utilizes a hybrid electric-diesel power system, Winters explained, providing superior acceleration, reduced thermal signature, and 32% improved fuel efficiency compared to the M1A2 Abrams. Its main armament is a 120mm smoothbore gun in a limited traverse mounting, supplemented by a remotely operated 30 cannon and coaxial machine gun, Harrington added. The fire control system incorporates advanced targeting algorithms that achieve 98% hit probability against moving targets at ranges up to 3,000 meters. One of the civilian committee members looked skeptical. Limited traverse mounting? You've eliminated the rotating turret? Correct, Harrington confirmed. The traditional turret is the most complex, expensive, and vulnerable component of a main battle tank. By using a fixed casemate with limited gun traverse, we've reduced weight, complexity, and target profile while maintaining combat effectiveness through enhanced mobility and tactical positioning. Reynolds scoffed audibly. So your innovation is to eliminate the tank's greatest advantage? A 360-degree firing arc is fundamental to modern armored warfare. A 360-degree firing arc is rarely utilized in actual combat, Harrington countered. Analysis of engagement data from Desert Storm, Iraq, and Afghanistan shows that over 90% of tank engagements occur within a 60-degree frontal arc. Sentinel's gun can traverse 45 degrees left and right, covering the most critical engagement zones. Before Reynolds could respond, Chen activated the demonstration sequence. Inside the prototype, Washington brought the systems online. The Sentinel's hybrid power plant hummed to life, a sound markedly different from the roaring turbine of an Abrams. Mobility demonstration commencing, Chen announced. The prototype began moving through the test course, demonstrating its acceleration, turning radius, and obstacle navigation capabilities. Despite its unfinished state, the Sentinel moved with impressive agility, its advanced suspension system absorbing terrain variations that would have jolted a conventional tank. Target acquisition demonstration, Chen continued, activating the weapon systems in simulation mode. On the committee members' tablets, targeting data appeared as the Sentinel's fire control systems locked onto a series of test targets. Hit probabilities, ammunition selection recommendations, and engagement parameters were displayed in real time. The system incorporates both autonomous target detection and human confirmation, Winters explained. The AI identifies potential threats and suggests optimal engagement parameters, but the final firing decision remains with the human operator. Reynolds watched the demonstration with narrowed eyes, clearly searching for flaws. When the Sentinel completed its circuit of the test course, he stepped forward. Impressive mobility, he acknowledged, but I notice you haven't demonstrated the crew interface systems. The neural mapping technology Dr. Harrington has been developing seems conspicuously absent. Sarah, who had been observing quietly from the monitoring station, tensed at the mention of her name. Reynolds had done his research, identifying the key innovations still in development. The advanced crew interface is still being refined, Winters admitted, but the basic system is functional. Perhaps a committee member would like to experience it firsthand, Reynolds suggested smoothly. After all, the human element is supposedly Sentinel's advantage over autonomous systems. It was a calculated move. Reynolds knew the interface wasn't ready for inexperienced users. Any committee member who attempted to operate the prototype would likely struggle, reinforcing Reynolds' narrative about the superiority of fully autonomous systems. Before Harrington could intervene, one of the generals, a younger man who had remained largely silent during the proceedings, stepped forward. I'd be interested in trying the interface. Chen looked to Harrington for direction. After a moment's consideration, Harrington nodded. Commander Chen will assist you with the interface equipment, General. As Chen helped the general don the neural interface apparatus, Harrington moved closer to Washington, still seated in the commander's position. Simplify the control schema, he said quietly. Basic movement only. Keep the assist systems at maximum. Washington nodded almost imperceptibly. He understood the stakes. The general was guided into the prototype's crew compartment, taking the gunner's position while Washington remained in command. Chen explained the basic principles of the neural interface, which translated the operator's intentions into vehicle actions through a combination of minimal physical controls and neural monitoring. Think of it as an extension of your body, Chen advised. The system learns from your responses, anticipating your intentions based on minimal inputs. For the next 10 minutes, the general attempted to operate the targeting systems using the prototype interface. His initial efforts were clumsy, with noticeable lag between his commands and the system's response. But as the neural mapping adjusted to his patterns, his control gradually improved. The learning curve is significant, Reynolds noted to the other committee members. In combat, operators wouldn't have time to acclimate to the system. The production version will incorporate pre-mission calibration and standardized neural mapping, Winters countered. Current limitations are due to the prototype nature of the system. When the demonstration concluded, the general removed the interface equipment, his expression thoughtful. Interesting concept, I said. Definitely different from conventional controls. I can see the potential, though the current implementation needs refinement. The committee reconvened in the conference room to discuss their observations. Reynolds continued to highlight the prototype's unfinished elements and unconventional design choices, while Harrington emphasized the strategic and tactical advantages of the Sentinel approach. The fundamental question, Porter said finally, is whether Project Sentinel represents a viable alternative to fully autonomous combat systems. Based on today's demonstration, is the prototype on track to meet that objective within the specified timeline? The committee members exchanged glances, their opinions clearly divided. The female civilian spoke first. The prototype shows promise, but significant technical challenges remain. The neural interface in particular requires substantial development. And the deviation from conventional tank design raises questions about tactical integration with existing forces, added one of the generals. Reynolds seized the opening. Perhaps a compromise is in order. The Obsidian platform could incorporate elements of Sentinel's human-machine interface, creating a hybrid system that preserves human oversight while leveraging autonomous capabilities. It was a masterful political move. Reynolds was positioning himself as reasonable, willing to adapt, while effectively proposing to absorb and neutralize the Sentinel project. That would delay Obsidian's deployment schedule, Porter noted. A small price for ensuring optimal capability, Reynolds replied smoothly. The committee could extend both projects' evaluation periods, allowing for potential integration of technologies. Harrington recognized the trap. An extended timeline would only give Reynolds more opportunities to undermine Sentinel while advancing Obsidian's development. But direct opposition would make him appear inflexible and resistant to collaboration. Integration should be based on completed systems evaluation, Harrington had said carefully. Both projects should first demonstrate their capabilities independently, then assess potential synergies from a position of proven performance. The committee appeared to accept this logic. After further discussion, they decided to maintain both projects' original timelines, with a formal evaluation at the 90-day mark. However, they also instituted weekly progress reviews and stricter oversight of the Sentinel project's personnel and methodology. As the meeting concluded and the committee members departed, Reynolds lingered behind. When only he and Harrington remained in the conference room, he dropped his collaborative demeanor. "Impressive save, Colonel, but you've only delayed the inevitable." "Is that what this is to you?" Harrington asked. "A game to be won or lost?" "This is the future of warfare," Reynolds replied. "A future that doesn't include obsolete concepts or outdated warriors clinging to their relevance." "You've never commanded men in combat, have you, Reynolds?" Something flickered across Reynolds' face. "I served. Marine Corps, Iraq, 2 tours. But not in command," Harrington pressed, "not making life or death decisions for others." Reynolds' expression hardened. "I made plenty of life or death decisions, and I learned that humans are the weak link in combat operations. Emotions, fatigue, fear, uncertainty. Remove those elements, and you have perfect execution of mission parameters. There's nothing perfect about war, son. It's messy, chaotic, unpredictable. That's why human judgment matters. Machines can execute, but they can't understand the human cost of their actions." "Save the philosophy for your retirement speech, Colonel." Reynolds moved toward the door, then paused. "You know what the difference is between us? You're trying to preserve the past. I'm building the future, and history always favors the builders." After Reynolds departed, Harrington remained in the empty conference room, considering the man's words. There was something personal driving Reynolds' crusade against human operators, something beyond profit motive or technological ideology. He made a note to investigate Reynolds' service record more thoroughly. Understanding an adversary's motivations was essential in any conflict. That evening, Harrington found himself unable to sleep. The day's confrontation with Reynolds and the committee had left him restless, his mind racing with contingency plans and counter strategies. Around midnight, he gave up on rest and returned to the facility. The vehicle bay was dimly lit, with only security lighting illuminating the Sentinel prototype in the center. Harrington expected to find the space empty, but as he approached the vehicle, he noticed someone sitting on a workbench nearby, silhouetted against the low light. "Couldn't sleep either?" Sarah asked without turning. Harrington stopped, surprised to find his daughter there. "Too much on my mind. The interface problems," she guessed. "I saw the demonstration today. Neural mapping failed to adjust quickly enough to the General's patterns." Among other issues, Harrington acknowledged, moving to stand beside the workbench, Reynolds manipulated the situation effectively. They sat in silence for a moment, both staring at the prototype. Despite its unfinished state, the Sentinel had taken on a distinctive character, its angular hull and low profile giving it the appearance of a predator poised to strike. "Why did you ask me to join this project?" Sarah finally asked. "Really?" Harrington considered his answer carefully. "Because you're the best person for the problem we're trying to solve. Your work on adaptive neural interfaces is years ahead of anyone else in the field." "That's it? Just professional respect? What else would it be?" Sarah turned to look at him directly. "I don't know. Guilt? A belated attempt at connection? You missed most of my childhood because tanks were more important than family. Now you want me to help you save them." The accusation stung, not because it was unfair, but because it contained elements of truth. Harrington had prioritized his military duties throughout Sarah's youth, believing his service was for the greater good. Elizabeth had understood his commitment, had supported it, but Sarah had only seen her father's absence. "I won't deny that my service took me away from you and your mother," Harrington said slowly. "That's a regret I live with daily. But this project isn't about tanks, Sarah. It's about keeping human judgment in warfare, about ensuring that the power to take lives remains in human hands, with all the moral weight and responsibility that entails." "And you think that matters to me?" "I think it should matter to everyone. The moment we delegate killing to autonomous machines is the moment we surrender something fundamental about our humanity." Sarah was quiet for a long time, considering his words. Finally, she asked, "What happened in Iraq? The incident that still gives you nightmares?" Harrington stiffened. "How do you know about that?" "Mom told me years ago, said you came back different, that something happened involving civilians, but you never talked about it." The memories came unbidden. Desert Storm, 1991, a small village near the Kuwait border. Intelligence reports of Republican Guard units using civilian structures for cover. His company of tanks advancing under fire, decision made in seconds that would echo for decades. "We received reports of enemy armor in a village," Harrington said, his voice distant. "I ordered engagement, standard procedure, confirmed targets. But the intelligence was wrong. The tanks were agricultural vehicles, civilian casualties, 27 dead." Sarah watched his face, seeing the pain etched in lines she hadn't noticed before. "That wasn't your fault. You followed protocol based on the information you had. A human operator can feel remorse, can learn from tragic errors, can carry the weight of those decisions," Harrington said. "A machine simply executes its programming, then moves to the next target. No reflection, no moral growth." "You think Reynolds doesn't understand that?" "I think Reynolds believes removing human emotion from warfare makes it cleaner, more efficient. He's wrong. It just makes it easier to wage, easier to justify." Sarah considered this. "The interface problems can be solved," she said finally. "I've been working on an alternative approach. Instead of trying to map the operator's neural patterns to specific functions, we create a more intuitive system that responds to intention rather than direct command. Like how you don't consciously think about each muscle movement when you walk." "Can you implement it within our timeline?" "With the right team, yes. I'll need Chen and 2 of the software engineers full-time." Harrington nodded. "You'll have them." As Sarah stood to leave, she hesitated. "This doesn't fix anything between us. I'm here for the work, not for some father-daughter reconciliation." "I understand," Harrington said, "but I'm grateful for your help, regardless of the reason." After she left, Harrington approached the Sentinel prototype, placing his hand on its armored hull as he had done with countless tanks throughout his career. The metal was cool beneath his palm, inert without the human operators that would give it purpose and direction. "We'll make this work," he promised quietly, "for all of them." Chapter 8, The Enemy Within. 58 days into the 90-day deadline, Project Sentinel faced a critical juncture. The prototype had progressed rapidly, with most major systems now operational and integrated. Sarah's innovative approach to the neural interface had resolved the control issues demonstrated during the committee inspection, creating a remarkably intuitive human-machine connection that allowed operators to control the vehicle with minimal physical input. But as technical challenges were overcome, political obstacles multiplied. Reynolds had intensified his campaign against the project, leveraging his connections in Washington to generate negative press coverage and congressional scrutiny. Major news outlets carried stories questioning the cost-effectiveness of crewed combat vehicles in the age of autonomous systems. Military blogs published leaked concerns about Sentinel's unconventional design and hasty development process. Most damaging was a front-page article in the Washington Post, featuring anonymous sources from within the Pentagon who claimed the project was a desperate attempt to preserve outdated warfare doctrine at the expense of superior technology. The article quoted several military analysts who questioned the wisdom of investing in crewed combat vehicles when autonomous alternatives promise greater effectiveness at lower cost. The project team gathered in the conference room to discuss the mounting pressure. Maps, technical diagrams, and progress charts covered the walls, testament to their achievements despite the obstacles placed in their path. But the mood was somber. The Oversight Committee is calling for another inspection, Major Lewis reported. They're concerned about the negative press coverage and want to reevaluate the project's viability. Reynolds is orchestrating this, Harrington said, creating a narrative of failure before we've even completed development. It's working, Chen noted grimly. I have contacts at DARPA who say funding for crewed combat systems is being reevaluated across the board. The Obsidian approach is gaining support among decision makers. Washington, who had been quietly examining a mechanical diagram, looked up. This was never just about technology. It's about philosophy of warfare. Reynolds wants to remove the human element entirely, make combat a remote-controlled video game. Precisely, Harrington agreed. And if Sentinel fails, it strengthens his argument that the era of human operators is over. Dr. Winters, who had been reviewing data on her tablet, placed it on the table where everyone could see the screen. We have another problem. Component failure rates are increasing. Key systems are malfunctioning after normal operation periods. Mechanical issues? Washington asked with a frown. No, the mechanical systems are solid. It's the electronic components, particularly in the targeting and communication systems. They're failing at rates significantly higher than manufacturer specifications would predict. Sarah leaned forward, examining the data. These aren't random failures. There's a pattern here. Specific components failing in sequence, creating cascading system errors. Sabotage, Chen suggested? Possible, Sarah acknowledged, but these are sophisticated failures that appear normal under initial diagnostics. It would require intimate knowledge of our system's architecture. The implication hung in the air. If sabotage was occurring, it suggested an insider threat, someone on the project team working to ensure Sentinel's failure. Harrington surveyed the room, considering each person present. The core team had worked together intensively for almost 2 months, developing the bonds that form under pressure and shared purpose. The idea that one of them might be deliberately undermining the project was disturbing, but couldn't be dismissed. We need to compartmentalize, he decided. From now on, critical systems development is restricted to this room only. No digital transmission of design specifications or test results. Paper documentation only, secured here when not in use. That will slow development significantly, Winters warned. Better slow progress than compromise systems, Harrington replied. Major Lewis, implement a security protocol for all electronic components. Every piece of hardware is to be tested before installation, then monitored continuously after integration. Lewis nodded. I'll set up a secure testing lab. Nothing gets installed without verification. What about the committee inspection? Chen asked. They're scheduled to arrive in 3 days. We proceed as planned, Harrington said. The prototype is functional enough for demonstration purposes. Dr. Winters, prepare a technical briefing emphasizing our progress and addressing the concerns raised in the media. As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed to their tasks, Harrington remained in the conference room with Washington, who had stayed behind, examining the component failure data more carefully. What do you see, Calvin? Harrington asked. Washington pointed to specific entries in the failure log. These patterns, they remind me of something I saw in Desert Storm. Iraqi forces had acquired Soviet electronic warfare systems capable of inducing specific failure modes in our communications equipment. Not jamming, but targeted degradation that was difficult to diagnose. You think someone's using similar technology against us? Possibly. Or it could be compromised components installed during assembly. Either way, it's sophisticated and deliberate. Harrington considered this. Reynolds has the technical resources to develop such capabilities, and he certainly has the motivation. But he'd need someone inside to implement it, Washington noted. Someone with access to our systems during development. The possibility had been growing in Harrington's mind since the component failures were first reported. We've had dozens of contractors and support personnel rotating through the project. Any one of them could have been compromised. Or it could be someone closer, Washington said quietly. Someone on the core team. The thought was troubling, but Harrington couldn't dismiss it. In his 40 years of service, he had seen how money, ideology, or personal grievance could turn even loyal soldiers against their comrades. We keep this between us for now, Harrington decided. Implement the security measures we discussed, but don't mention potential insider threat. I'll conduct my own investigation. Later that day, Harrington met with Porter at a secure location away from Fort Hood, a small diner in a nearby town where two old soldiers could talk without raising suspicions. Porter looked tired, the political battles in Washington clearly taking their toll. The situation is deteriorating, Jim, Porter said after they had ordered coffee. Reynolds has gained significant support on the Appropriations Committee. His arguments about cost savings and casualty reduction are compelling to politicians with no military experience. What about the military leadership? Surely they understand the implications of fully autonomous weapon systems? Porter sighed. Opinion is divided. The younger generation of officers sees the appeal of remote operations. No risk to personnel, precise targeting, continuous battlefield presence. The old guard is more skeptical, but they're increasingly seen as resistant to progress. Progress toward what? Harrington asked. Warfare without moral accountability, without human judgment. I agree with you, Porter said, but we're losing the argument. Unless Sentinel demonstrates clear superiority over Obsidian in the final evaluation, the funding will shift entirely to autonomous systems. Harrington nodded grimly. We're facing technical sabotage as well, component failures, possibly electronic warfare targeting our systems. Porter looked alarmed. You think Reynolds would go that far? I think Reynolds believes absolutely in his vision of warfare's future and will do whatever necessary to realize it. Harrington paused. I need information on his background, his service record in Iraq. There's something personal driving him. I'll see what I can find, Porter promised. But be careful, Jim. If you accuse him of sabotage without irrefutable evidence, he'll use it to discredit the entire project. I'm not planning to accuse him publicly. I just need to understand what we're facing. When Harrington returned to the facility that evening, he found Sarah working alone in the interface development lab, surrounded by neural mapping equipment and diagnostic displays. She looked up as he entered, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. The new interface architecture is ready for implementation, she reported. Simulation testing shows a 43% improvement in operator response time and a 67% reduction in control errors. Good work, Harrington said, but that's not why I'm here. Sarah raised an eyebrow questioningly. I need your help with something outside your normal responsibilities, Harrington explained. We believe some of our electronic components may have been compromised. I need a way to detect and neutralize any embedded vulnerabilities without alerting their source. You suspect sabotage. I suspect prudence. When a critical project experiences unusual technical difficulties, all possibilities must be considered. Sarah thought for a moment. I can develop a diagnostic protocol that appears to be standard system verification but actually scans for anomalous code or hardware behavior. It would run in the background during normal operations, logging any suspicious activities without triggering alerts. How long would it take to implement? 24 hours for a basic version, longer for something more sophisticated. Do it, Harrington decided. Work with Chen on the implementation, but keep the true purpose confidential. Tell him it's a systems optimization protocol. Sarah studied her father's fate. You don't trust your own team. Trust but verify. An old Cold War principle that remains relevant. As he turned to leave, Sarah called after him. What happens if we find evidence of sabotage? Harrington paused at the door. Then we find the source and eliminate the threat. And if the source is someone on the core team, someone we've all been working with daily? The question struck at Harrington's deepest concern. The core team had become a tight-knit unit, relying on each other through countless challenges. The thought that one of them might be actively working against the project was painful to contemplate. Then we handle it appropriately, he said finally. But let's not assume the worst until we have evidence. Over the next 48 hours, Sarah and Chen implemented the diagnostic protocol across all Sentinel systems. Disguised as a routine optimization update, it began monitoring component behavior and logging anomalies without triggering obvious alerts that might warn a saboteur. Meanwhile, Harrington prepared for the Oversight Committee's inspection. The prototype was now fully operational, though several systems remained in early integration stages. Washington and his mechanical team had resolved the track tensioning issues that had caused vibration during earlier tests. The targeting systems had been hardened against electronic interference. The crew interface had been completely redesigned using Sarah's innovative approach. The night before the inspection, Harrington received a secure message from Porter containing information on Reynolds' military service. The details were illuminating. Reynolds had indeed served 2 tours in Iraq as a Marine, but his record contained a significant incident that had been carefully obscured in his public biography. During his second tour, Reynolds had been part of a forward reconnaissance unit ambushed near Fallujah. In the chaos, he had abandoned his position, leaving 2 wounded Marines who were subsequently captured and executed by insurgents. The official investigation had concluded that Reynolds was not technically guilty of dereliction of duty, as the unit was already overrun when he withdrew, but the circumstances were suspicious enough to end his military career. After leaving the Marines, Reynolds had worked for several defense contractors before founding Quantum Defense, with funding from venture capital firms. His company had specialized in autonomous systems from the beginning, with an emphasis on removing human operators from dangerous situations. The pattern was clear to Harrington. Reynolds' advocacy for autonomous weapons wasn't just about technology or profit. It was personal. He had experienced the human element in warfare as a liability, a source of fear and failure, and had dedicated his subsequent career to eliminating it. This insight didn't excuse potential sabotage, but it provided context for Reynolds' almost fanatical opposition to Sentinel. He wasn't just competing for a contract. He was trying to erase a painful chapter of his past by creating a future where soldiers like himself never had to face combat directly. As Harrington considered this information, his phone alerted him to a priority message from Sarah. The diagnostic protocol had identified multiple anomalies in the Sentinel's electronic systems, consistent with deliberate tampering. More concerning, it had detected an active intrusion attempt originating from within the facility's secure network. Someone on the inside was indeed working against them, and with the committee inspection hours away, the threat had never been more acute. Chapter 9. The Unexpected Ally. Dawn broke over Fort Hood as Harrington convened an emergency meeting with his most trusted team members, Washington, Sarah, Chen, and Dr. Winters. They gathered in the secure testing lab, where electronic countermeasures prevented any possibility of surveillance. "We have confirmation of sabotage," Harrington announced without preamble. Sarah's diagnostic protocol identified multiple compromised components and an ongoing intrusion attempt within our network. "From inside the facility?" Winters asked, her expression grave. Sarah nodded, activating a display that showed network traffic analysis. "The intrusion pattern indicates someone with high-level access to our systems, using that access to create subtle malfunctions that would appear as normal development issues." "Do we know who?" Chen asked, the question everyone was thinking. "Not yet," Harrington admitted. "The activity is being routed through multiple access points to obscure its origin, but we've narrowed it to someone with system administrator privileges." That still included nearly a dozen individuals, including several members of the core team. "The committee arrives in 4 hours," Winters noted. "If the sabotage continues during the demonstration—" "It won't," Harrington assured her. "We're implementing a compartmentalized control system for the demonstration. Only the 5 of us will have access." Sarah explained the protocol. Sarah brought up a schematic of the Sentinel's control architecture. "We've created a parallel control system isolated from the main network. It bypasses potentially compromised components and routes all commands through a secure air-gapped server. Chen and I will monitor all system functions directly during the demonstration." "What about the physical components that have been compromised?" Washington asked. "Already addressed," Harrington said. "Calvin and I spent the night replacing every suspicious component with verified spares from the secure inventory. The prototype is clean." The group discussed final preparations for the committee inspection. Each assigned specific responsibilities to ensure the demonstration proceeded without interference. As they concluded, Harrington held Winters back for a private word. "Elaine, I need you to manage something delicate," he said once they were alone. During the demonstration, observe the team carefully, particularly anyone with system access. Watch for unusual behavior, anyone checking devices they shouldn't be using, any signs of undue stress or interest in specific systems. Winter's eyes widened slightly as she understood. You think our saboteur will attempt to disrupt the demonstration directly? I think they'll be monitoring for signs that we've detected their activities. Your role is to observe while appearing to focus entirely on the technical briefing. Understood, she agreed. And if I identify suspicious behavior, report it only to me, no one else. We handle this very carefully. As Winters left to prepare her technical presentation, Harrington's phone buzzed with a message from Porter. Reynolds arrived early with 2 committee members. They're requesting access to interview project personnel separately before the main inspection. It was an unexpected move, clearly intended to unsettle the team and potentially identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited during the main demonstration. Harrington replied affirming their right to conduct interviews, but requesting that he be present for each one as project director. 3 hours before the scheduled inspection, Reynolds and 2 committee members arrived at the facility. One was the female civilian Harrington recognized from the previous inspection, the other a new face, a military officer with general's insignia who introduced himself as General Howard, representing the Joint Chiefs' interest in the project. Colonel Harrington, Reynolds greeted him with practiced cordiality. Thank you for accommodating our early arrival. The committee felt it would be valuable to speak with key team members about their experiences on the project. Of course, Harrington replied evenly. I'll be sitting in on these conversations as project director. Reynolds smiled thinly. Actually, Colonel, the purpose of separate interviews is to allow team members to speak freely without concern for chain of command. Your presence would defeat that purpose. General Howard nodded in agreement. Standard procedure for project evaluation, Colonel, ensures we get unfiltered perspectives. Harrington recognized the trap, but had limited options for resisting without appearing obstructive. Very well, but I must insist that all interviews be conducted in pairs, with at least 2 team members present. Security protocols for the project require it. This was a fabrication, but delivered with sufficient authority that the committee members accepted it without question. Reynolds looked momentarily displeased, but quickly masked his reaction. Of course, Colonel, security is paramount. For the next 2 hours, Reynolds and the committee members conducted interviews with paired team members. Harrington arranged the pairs strategically, keeping his most trusted personnel together and ensuring that anyone he had concerns about was paired with someone he trusted absolutely. As the interviews progressed, Sarah's diagnostic system continued monitoring network activity, detecting multiple attempts to access the Sentinel's control systems from various terminals throughout the facility. Each attempt was blocked by their new security protocols, but the persistence indicated growing desperation from their saboteur. Meanwhile, Washington supervised final preparations of the prototype, personally verifying each system before the demonstration. The Sentinel stood ready in the test bay, its angular hull gleaming under the bright lights, every system optimized for peak performance. 30 minutes before the full committee was scheduled to arrive, Harrington received an urgent message from Sarah. Critical security breach detected. Someone bypassed air gap, attempting to locate source now. This was the worst-case scenario. Despite their precautions, someone had found a way to breach their isolated systems. If the saboteur succeeded in compromising the demonstration, the Sentinel project would be terminated immediately. Harrington moved quickly through the facility, searching for Sarah. He found her in a maintenance alcove near the main control center, working feverishly on a portable terminal. What's the situation? He asked quietly. Someone physically connected a device to our secure server, she explained without looking up from her work. They installed a timed execution program designed to trigger system failures during specific demonstration sequences. Can you stop it? Already done, she confirmed. I've isolated and neutralized the program, but I also traced the authentication signature used to access the server. She turned the screen so Harrington could see the results. The name displayed was immediately recognizable. Major Lewis, the project's military liaison and security officer. Lewis? Harrington's surprise was genuine. Are you certain? The authentication is definitive, Sarah confirmed, and the access logs show he's been systematically compromising systems for weeks, always during shift changes when monitoring was minimal. The revelation was deeply disturbing. Lewis had been with the project from the beginning, had participated in every critical decision. He had access to every aspect of the Sentinel's development and had been responsible for implementing many of the security protocols now revealed as compromised. "Where is he now?" Harrington asked. "Unknown. He left the interview room approximately 20 minutes ago, claiming he needed to retrieve documentation for the committee." Harrington made a quick decision. Lock down all project data, revoke Lewis's access credentials, alert Chen in Washington, but keep this information strictly among the four of us for now. As Sarah implemented these measures, Harrington contacted facility security, instructing them to locate Lewis without alerting him and to monitor his movements without interception. The situation required careful handling, especially with Reynolds and the committee on site. 10 minutes later, as Harrington was briefing Chen in Washington on the situation, Dr. Winters entered the secure room, her expression troubled. "Lewis just entered the main test bay," she reported. "He's accessing the prototype's maintenance panel." Harrington moved immediately toward the test bay, instructing the others to maintain their positions and continue preparations, as if nothing were amiss. He entered the vast space quietly, observing from the shadowed entrance as Lewis worked on an open access panel beneath the Sentinel's hull. For several minutes, Harrington watched, confirming that Lewis was indeed attempting to modify something within the prototype systems. Then he stepped forward, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. "Need some help with that, Major?" Lewis stiffened, then slowly straightened and turned. His expression was composed, but his eyes betrayed momentary panic before settling into resignation. "Colonel," he acknowledged, "just performing a final systems check before the demonstration." "Interesting approach," Harrington noted. "Bypassing standard diagnostic protocols, accessing maintenance systems directly. Almost as if you didn't want the access logged." Lewis's hand moved subtly toward his sidearm. Harrington tensed, ready to respond, but Lewis ultimately let his hand fall back to his side. "You know," Lewis said quietly. "We know," Harrington confirmed. "What I don't know is why. You've served with distinction for 15 years. Your record is exemplary, so why betray everything you've stood for?" Lewis's expression hardened. "I haven't betrayed anything. I'm ensuring American military superiority by supporting the superior technology. Obsidian is the future, Colonel. Sentinel is the past, no matter how you dress it up." "So Reynolds recruited you." "Reynolds recognized reality," Lewis countered. "Autonomous systems will dominate future battlefields. Keeping humans in combat vehicles is sentimentality, not strategy." "And what did he offer you? Money, position in his company after retirement?" A flicker of discomfort crossed Lewis's face. "It's not about personal gain. It's about serving the country's best interests." "By sabotaging a U.S. military project?" Harrington's voice was calm but cutting. "By undermining the work of dedicated professionals trying to develop the best possible combat system for American soldiers?" "I did what was necessary to ensure the right decision is made," Lewis insisted. "The committee needs to see that human-operated systems are inherently flawed, prone to failure under pressure. Obsidian eliminates those vulnerabilities, along with human judgment, moral responsibility, and the warrior ethos that has defined American military service for generations." Lewis shook his head. "Philosophy doesn't win wars, Colonel. Technology does." "Technology is just a tool," Harrington replied. "The warrior behind it makes the difference." He gestured toward the door. "The security team is waiting outside. You'll be detained pending investigation for espionage and sabotage of classified military systems." For a moment, Lewis looked as if he might resist. Then his shoulders slumped slightly, the fight going out of him. "It doesn't matter. The damage is done. Even if today's demonstration succeeds, Reynolds has enough influence to ensure Sentinel never reaches production." "We'll see about that," Harrington said, escorting Lewis to the door where security personnel waited to take him into custody. After Lewis was removed, Harrington gathered his core team again, bringing them up to speed on the situation. The full committee would arrive in less than 15 minutes, with no time to comprehensively check for additional sabotage Lewis might have implemented. "We proceed as planned," Harrington decided. "Sarah, Chen, maintain constant monitoring of all systems during the demonstration. Washington, you'll operate the prototype with me as second crew member. Dr. Winters, conduct the technical briefing as prepared. No mention of the security breach unless I indicate otherwise." The team dispersed to their positions as the facility's main entrance reported the arrival of the complete oversight committee, including General Porter and several high-ranking Pentagon officials who hadn't attended previous inspections. The increased attendance underscored the importance of this demonstration as the determining factor in Sentinel's future. As Harrington moved to greet the committee, he noticed Reynolds already in conversation with several members, his expression animated as he emphasized some point. Their eyes met briefly across the room, and Reynolds smiled with the confidence of someone who believed victory was already assured. Unknown to either of them, the day's events would unfold in ways neither had anticipated, setting the stage for a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of Project Sentinel, but the future of American armored warfare itself. The Oversight Committee assembled in the observation room overlooking the test range, their faces grave with the weight of the decision before them. Through the reinforced glass, they could see the Sentinel prototype positioned at the starting point of the demonstration course, its low profile and angular armor catching the morning light. Nearby stood the Obsidian autonomous combat vehicle that Reynolds had brought for comparison, its sleek, turretless design emphasizing its advanced technology. Harrington stood before the committee, his uniform crisp despite the sleepless night he'd endured. Porter sat at the center of the long table, flanked by generals, civilian officials, and congressional representatives. Reynolds occupied a chair slightly apart, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes betraying satisfaction. The news of Major Lewis's arrest for sabotage had spread quickly, and Reynolds had skillfully framed it as evidence of the Sentinel project's fundamental instability. Colonel Harrington, Porter began formally, in light of recent developments, the committee has considered postponing today's evaluation. However, given the approaching budget deadline and the urgent need for a decision on future combat system development, we've elected to proceed. Are you prepared to demonstrate the Sentinel prototype as scheduled? We are, General, Harrington confirmed. The prototype is fully operational and ready for comprehensive evaluation. Reynolds leaned forward slightly. General Porter, I feel compelled to note that the integrity of the Sentinel project has been compromised. Major Lewis's actions raise serious questions about the reliability of the prototype and the team's ability to maintain proper security protocols. Major Lewis's actions have been addressed, Harrington countered evenly. All affected systems have been verified and secured. The prototype's performance will speak for itself. Porter nodded. We'll proceed with the demonstration as planned. Both the Sentinel and Obsidian systems will navigate the test course, engaging simulated targets and responding to tactical challenges. This will be followed by a direct comparison exercise where both systems address identical combat scenarios. Dr. Winters stepped forward to provide the technical briefing, outlining Sentinel's capabilities and innovations with precise clarity. As she spoke, Harrington watched Reynolds, noting how the man's attention seemed focused not on the presentation, but on his tablet, where he appeared to be monitoring something with intense interest. The key differentiator of the Sentinel system, Winters emphasized, is its revolutionary human-machine interface. Unlike traditional tanks requiring 4 crew members, or fully autonomous systems with no human element, Sentinel achieves optimal performance with just 2 operators whose capabilities are significantly enhanced by adaptive neural mapping technology. And this technology has been fully tested under combat conditions? Asked one of the congressional representatives, a skeptical frown creasing his forehead. The technology has undergone rigorous simulation testing, Winters clarified. Today's demonstration will be its first full-scale field evaluation. Reynolds smiled thinly. By contrast, Obsidian's autonomous systems have completed over 2,000 hours of field testing, including simulated urban warfare, electronic countermeasure environments, and multi-unit tactical operations. Its performance metrics consistently exceed human operator capabilities by 27 to 43%. The committee members murmured among themselves, clearly impressed by these figures. Harrington knew they were facing an uphill battle. Reynolds had spent years developing Obsidian, carefully constructing both the technology and the narrative around it. Sentinel, despite its innovations, remained the underdog. We're prepared to begin the demonstration, Harrington announced, bringing the focus back to the task at hand. Commander Chen and I will operate Sentinel. Mr. Reynolds will presumably control Obsidian remotely. Reynolds stood. Actually, to ensure fair comparison, I've arranged for an independent operator to control Obsidian during the demonstration. Colonel Robert Whalen from DARPA's Autonomous Systems Division will manage the exercise from the Secure Command Center. It was a calculated move. By removing himself from direct control, Reynolds created the appearance of objectivity while ensuring Obsidian would be operated by someone firmly in the autonomous systems camp. As the committee moved to the demonstration viewing area, Harrington took a moment with his team. Washington, Sarah, and Chen gathered around him, their expressions resolute despite the pressure. "Whatever happens today," Harrington said quietly, "you've accomplished something remarkable. In less than 90 days, you've created a combat system that honors the tradition of American armored warfare while embracing its future." "We're not done yet, Colonel," Washington replied with a determined smile. "This old tanker still has a few tricks to teach these youngsters about real-world combat." Sarah nodded. "The interface is performing optimally. The neural mapping will adapt to your command patterns within the first 60 seconds of operation. After that, the system should feel like a natural extension of your intentions. And I'll be monitoring all systems from the control room," Chen added. "If Reynolds has any other surprises planned, we'll detect them." Harrington regarded each of them with quiet pride. Despite the odds against them, despite the political forces aligned with Reynolds, they had persevered. Now they would let their creation speak for itself. The demonstration began with basic mobility and targeting exercises. Both vehicles navigated the test course, demonstrating acceleration, maneuverability, and obstacle navigation capabilities. The Obsidian moved with machine precision, its movements calculated to maximize efficiency. The Sentinel, under Harrington's guidance, showed a different kind of performance, more fluid and adaptive, responding to the terrain with an almost intuitive understanding of optimal paths. Next came targeting exercises. Simulated enemy vehicles and infantry positions appeared on the range, requiring rapid identification and engagement. Obsidian's response was immediate, its targeting algorithms identifying and prioritizing threats with mechanical efficiency. Sentinel's approach revealed Harrington's decades of combat experience, prioritizing threats based on tactical significance rather than simply their immediate danger level. The committee members observed both approaches, making notes and exchanging occasional comments. Their expressions remained neutral, giving no indication of their assessments. As the demonstration progressed to more complex scenarios, Harrington noticed Reynolds checking his tablet with increasing frequency, his expression tightening imperceptibly. Something wasn't proceeding according to his plan. The final phase of the demonstration involved an urban warfare simulation, with both vehicles navigating a mock-up city environment filled with civilian structures, hidden threat positions, and ambush points. This was the most challenging scenario, requiring not just technical performance, but tactical judgment and adaptation to rapidly changing conditions. Obsidian entered the urban environment first, its sensors scanning buildings and alleyways for potential threats. Its performance was impressive, methodically clearing zones and engaging simulated enemy positions with precision. But its approach was predictable, following optimal clearance patterns that any experienced enemy would recognize and exploit. When Sentinel's turn came, Harrington employed a different strategy. Rather than following textbook urban clearance procedures, he used the buildings for cover, changed directions unpredictably, and prioritized positions that offered tactical advantages rather than simply clearing sectors sequentially. "Notice the difference in approach," Porter commented to the committee. "Obsidian follows programmed optimal procedures. Sentinel adapts to the specific urban layout, using terrain features that might not be factored into standard algorithms. But Obsidian cleared the environment more quickly," countered one of the civilian officials. "Efficiency matters in combat operations." "Speed isn't always the priority in urban operations," responded one of the military officers. "Sometimes methodical, unpredictable movement prevents ambush and reduces civilian casualties." The debate continued as the demonstration concluded, with both vehicles returning to their starting positions. The technical data showed Obsidian leading in most quantifiable metrics: target engagement speed, ammunition efficiency, and threat neutralization rates. But several of the military officers had noted Sentinel's superior tactical positioning and adaptability to unexpected situations. As the committee deliberated in the conference room, Harrington received an urgent message from Chen. "Detected unauthorized access attempt on Sentinel's diagnostic systems during the demonstration. Source traced to Reynolds' private terminal. Evidence secured." This confirmed Harrington's suspicions. Even with Lewis removed, Reynolds had attempted to interfere with the demonstration. The fact that they had detected and blocked the attempt suggested he had not succeeded, but the willingness to sabotage a U.S. military project during an official evaluation revealed the lengths to which Reynolds would go to ensure Obsidian's adoption. Harrington entered the conference room as the committee was concluding its initial assessment. The tension was palpable, with clear divisions among the members. The civilian officials and several younger officers appeared to favor Obsidian's quantifiable performance advantages, while the more experienced military personnel recognized the value of Sentinel's human judgment and tactical adaptability. Both systems demonstrated impressive capabilities, Porter summarized. Obsidian excels in speed and efficiency, while Sentinel shows superior tactical adaptation and judgment in complex environments. The metrics clearly favor Obsidian, Reynolds pointed out, displaying comparison charts on the main screen. Target acquisition time, engagement accuracy, threat neutralization rates all show statistically significant advantages for autonomous operation. Numbers don't tell the whole story, Harrington countered. Urban warfare isn't just about clearing rooms and engaging targets. It's about understanding the human environment, making moral judgments about use of force, and adapting to unexpected situations. Adaptability can be programmed, Reynolds insisted. Obsidian's neural networks learn from each engagement, constantly improving their tactical responses. Within the parameters of their programming, Harrington noted, but combat rarely conforms to expected parameters. That's where human judgment becomes invaluable. The debate continued, with both sides presenting compelling arguments. As the discussion seemed to reach an impasse, Harrington made a bold proposal. I suggest a final, definitive evaluation, he said. A direct competition between Sentinel and Obsidian under conditions that truly test both approaches. Not a scripted demonstration, but a genuine tactical challenge that requires real-time adaptation. Reynolds looked skeptical. What are you proposing, Colonel? A force-on-force exercise. Obsidian versus Sentinel in a tactical environment with multiple variables and no predetermined scenarios. A test that evaluates not just technical performance but combat effectiveness. The committee members exchanged glances, considering the proposal. Porter looked thoughtful. An interesting suggestion. It would provide a more comprehensive evaluation of both systems' capabilities in unpredictable conditions. I have no objection, Reynolds said confidently. Obsidian's superior targeting and decision algorithms will prevail in any scenario. Then it's settled, Porter decided. We'll conduct a force-on-force evaluation tomorrow morning at the Advanced Tactical Training Area. Both systems will engage in a simulated combat exercise with equal starting conditions and objectives. As the meeting adjourned, Reynolds approached Harrington, his expression a mixture of amusement and condescension. An interesting gambit, Colonel. Desperate, but interesting. Not desperate, Harrington replied calmly. Just ensuring that both systems are evaluated based on combat effectiveness, not just technical specifications. Combat effectiveness is precisely what Obsidian was designed for, Reynolds countered. Tomorrow will simply confirm what the data already shows. The era of human operators is ending. We'll see, Harrington said. There's a reason we don't send machines alone to fight our wars, Reynolds. Some lessons can only be learned on the battlefield, not in a laboratory. As Reynolds walked away, Porter joined Harrington. You're taking a significant risk, Jim. Obsidian has advantages in multiple performance categories. But not in the one that matters most, Harrington replied. The ability to understand the battlefield as more than just a problem to be solved, to recognize when the rules need to be broken, when convention becomes a liability. Porter nodded slowly. I hope you're right, because tomorrow will decide the future of American armored warfare for a generation. Chapter 11. Warriors and Machines. Dawn painted the tactical training area in hues of amber and gold, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain that would serve as the battlefield. The facility, covering several square miles of varied environments, had been designed to simulate realistic combat conditions for training elite units. Today it would host a different kind of contest, one that would determine the direction of American military development for decades to come. The Oversight Committee gathered in the elevated command center, where monitors displayed multiple views of the training area and real-time data from both combat systems. Porter stood at the center, flanked by the civilian and military officials who would render the final judgment. On the field below, the Sentinel and Obsidian vehicles waited at opposite ends of the training area. The exercise had been carefully structured to test both technical capabilities and tactical judgment. Each vehicle had to locate and neutralize a series of objective targets scattered throughout the area while contending with various obstacles, simulated civilian populations, and opposing forces. Points would be awarded for objectives completed, with deductions for civilian casualties, excessive force, or tactical errors. Harrington sat in the commander's position inside the Sentinel, Washington beside him as driver and systems operator. The neural interface helmet felt snug against his head, its sensors mapping his brain patterns and translating them into command protocols for the vehicle's systems. Systems check complete, Washington reported. All green across the board, no sign of tampering or unauthorized access attempts. Sarah and Chen have secured the diagnostic networks, Harrington noted. Reynolds won't be able to interfere this time. Washington grinned. Then it's just us against the machine. Old school versus new technology. Not exactly old school, Harrington corrected, gesturing at the advanced systems surrounding them. More like the best of both worlds. Human judgment enhanced by technology, not replaced by it. The communication system crackled as Porter's voice came through. Both teams, this is General Porter. The force-on-force evaluation will commence in 2 minutes. Your objectives have been uploaded to your tactical systems. Remember, this is a non-lethal exercise using simulation rounds and electronic scoring. Good luck to both teams. As Porter concluded, Harrington reviewed the mission parameters. 6 primary objectives scattered across the training area, each requiring different tactical approaches. Some were straightforward target neutralization. Others involved securing positions or extracting simulated personnel. Between the objectives lay challenging terrain, mock civilian settlements, and opposing force elements that would engage both vehicles. They've made this as realistic as possible, Washington observed. Multiple mission parameters, uncertain opposition placement, civilian considerations. Exactly the kind of complexity that favors human judgment, Harrington agreed. Let's show them what 40 years of combat experience brings to the fight. The starting signal sounded and both vehicles moved out from their deployment zones. Obsidian accelerated immediately to maximum speed, following what its algorithms had determined was the optimal route to the first objective. Sentinel, under Harrington's guidance, took a more measured approach, advancing at moderate speed while utilizing terrain features for concealment. Obsidian's heading straight for Objective Alpha, Washington noted, monitoring the tactical display. They're prioritizing speed over security. As expected, Harrington replied, their algorithms are optimizing for mission completion time. Let them race ahead while we gather tactical intelligence. Instead of proceeding directly to the first objective, Harrington directed the Sentinel to an elevated position that offered observation of multiple sectors. From this vantage point, they could observe Obsidian's movement patterns and the disposition of opposing forces across the battlefield. Opposition is concentrated around objectives Charlie and Echo, Washington reported after scanning the area with Sentinel's advanced sensor suite. Minimal presence at Alpha and Delta. Beta and Foxtrot have moderate coverage. They've set up a classic channeling strategy, Harrington analyzed. Minimal resistance at the early objectives to encourage commitment to a specific route, then heavier opposition as we progress. Obsidian is engaging at Alpha now, Washington noted. Clean neutralization, moving immediately toward Beta. They're following the expected progression. And walking right into the trap, Harrington observed. Let's take a different approach. Instead of following Obsidian's path, Harrington directed Sentinel toward Objective Charlie, one of the more heavily defended positions. This unexpected movement caught the opposing forces off guard, allowing Sentinel to approach from an unanticipated direction and engage from advantageous terrain. In the command center, the committee members watched with growing interest as the two vehicles employed radically different strategies. Obsidian moved with machine precision, engaging each objective in sequence with overwhelming firepower. Sentinel maneuvered more unpredictably, sometimes bypassing objectives temporarily to gain tactical advantage or eliminate key opposition elements before doubling back. Fascinating contrast in approaches, commented one of the generals. Obsidian is following classic mission optimization protocol, prioritizing direct objective completion. Sentinel is employing adaptive battlefield management, shaping the tactical environment before engaging objectives. Reynolds watched the monitors intently, his confident expression gradually giving way to concern as the exercise progressed. While Obsidian maintained its lead in objectives completed, Sentinel was demonstrating superior tactical awareness, consistently avoiding ambushes and minimizing exposure to enemy fire. The turning point came at Objective Echo, a simulated urban environment with civilian presence and concealed opposition forces. Obsidian entered the urban zone directly, its sensors scanning for enemy signatures and civilian patterns. When opposition forces opened fire from concealed positions, Obsidian responded with precise counterfire, neutralizing the threats but causing simulated collateral damage to civilian structures. Sentinel approached the same objective differently. Rather than entering the urban zone immediately, Harrington directed the vehicle through a series of maneuvers that drew out the opposition forces, exposing their positions without endangering the civilian areas. When Sentinel finally entered the urban environment, it was with comprehensive knowledge of enemy dispositions, allowing for selective engagement that minimized collateral effects. Sentinel has completed Objective Echo with 0 civilian casualties, reported the exercise controller. Obsidian completed the same objective with 4 civilian casualties and 27% structural damage to non-military targets. In the command center, this announcement shifted the atmosphere perceptibly. The military officers exchanged knowing glances, while several of the civilian officials reassessed their data with newfound interest in Sentinel's approach. As the exercise entered its final phase, with both vehicles converging on Objective Foxtrot, the differences in their approaches became even more pronounced. Obsidian, programmed to prioritize mission completion, moved directly toward the objective despite taking simulated damage from previously undetected opposition elements. Its tactical algorithms calculated that the fastest route to mission success was to accept certain damage while pressing the attack. Harrington, drawing on decades of combat experience, chose a more methodical approach. Recognizing signs of a prepared defensive position around the objective, he directed Sentinel through a flanking maneuver that neutralized key enemy support weapons before engaging the main defensive line. This approach took longer but preserved Sentinel's combat capability and minimized exposure to enemy fire. Obsidian has reached Objective Foxtrot, the controller announced, but has sustained critical system damage. Combat effectiveness reduced to 43%. Minutes later, Sentinel has reached Objective Foxtrot, combat effectiveness at 87%. The final scores reflected this fundamental difference in approach. Obsidian had completed all objectives more quickly, but had sustained significant simulated damage and caused multiple civilian casualties. Sentinel had taken longer to complete the mission, but had maintained higher combat effectiveness throughout and minimized collateral damage. As the exercise concluded and both vehicles returned to their starting positions, the committee members engaged in animated discussion, comparing the performance metrics and tactical outcomes. The quantitative data showed a mixed picture, with Obsidian excelling in speed and direct engagement effectiveness, while Sentinel demonstrated superior tactical adaptation and mission preservation capabilities. In the Sentinel, Harrington removed his neural interface helmet, feeling the familiar mixture of fatigue and alertness that followed intense tactical operations. Washington looked over with a questioning expression. "Did we do enough?" he asked quietly. Harrington considered this. "We showed them the difference between algorithmic efficiency and combat wisdom. Whether that's enough depends on what they truly value." The debriefing session that followed was rigorous and detailed. Both Harrington and Reynolds presented their analyses of the exercise, highlighting the strengths of their respective approaches. Reynolds emphasized Obsidian's superior speed and direct combat effectiveness, while Harrington focused on Sentinel's tactical adaptation and reduced collateral effects. "The data is clear," Reynolds argued. "Obsidian completed the mission parameters in 23% less time, with 17% higher target neutralization efficiency, while sustaining 57% combat degradation and causing significant simulated civilian casualties." Harrington countered. "Combat effectiveness isn't measured solely by speed and kill ratios. Preservation of force capability and discrimination in target engagement are equally crucial." The debate extended for hours, with committee members questioning both project leaders extensively. As the session neared its conclusion, Porter called for final statements. Reynolds spoke first. "Obsidian represents the inevitable evolution of warfare. We can sentimentalize human judgment and experience, but the empirical data demonstrates that autonomous systems simply perform better in most combat parameters. The future belongs to machines that can process battlefield information faster, engage targets more precisely, and execute mission parameters without human limitations." When his turn came, Harrington rose slowly, looking each committee member in the eye before speaking. "Throughout my 40 years of service," he began, "I've witnessed remarkable technological advancements. Each generation of weapon systems has been faster, more lethal, more sophisticated than the last. But the fundamental nature of warfare remains unchanged. It is still at its core a human endeavor. He paused, letting his words resonate in the silent room. Today's exercise demonstrated something crucial. Obsidian performed exactly as programmed, optimizing for mission completion with mechanical efficiency. Sentinel adapted to battlefield realities, made judgments about acceptable risk and collateral effects, and preserved its combat capability for follow-on operations. Harrington gestured to the data displays showing the exercise results. The question before you isn't simply which system performed better by quantifiable metrics. It's whether we want America's wars fought by machines executing algorithms or by warriors making judgments, with all the moral weight and responsibility that entails. He turned to face Reynolds directly. Mr. Reynolds believes the human element is a liability in warfare, a source of inefficiency and error. I believe it's our greatest strength, not despite our human limitations, but because of them. Because we understand the true cost of combat decisions in a way no machine ever can. As Harrington concluded, a thoughtful silence filled the room. Even Reynolds seemed momentarily without rebuttal, the conviction in Harrington's words giving pause to his technological certainty. Porter finally broke the silence. The committee will deliberate and render a decision tomorrow morning. Both projects have demonstrated significant capabilities and potential. Our task is to determine which approach best serves America's defense needs for the coming decades. As the meeting adjourned, Porter approached Harrington privately. Powerful statement, Jim. Reminded me why I've always been proud to serve alongside you. Did it make a difference? Harrington asked. Porter glanced toward the committee members, still engaged in animated discussion as they gathered their materials. It resonated with the military members. The civilian officials are harder to read. They see the budgetary appeal of Reynolds' approach. It's not just about budgets, Harrington said. It's about what kind of military we want to be. Whether we value efficiency over judgment, algorithms over experience. I know, Porter agreed solemnly. That's exactly what they're deciding. Chapter 12, Legacy. Morning light streamed through the windows of the conference room as the committee members took their seats for the final decision. The atmosphere was solemn, befitting the gravity of what they were about to determine. Porter sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, as he prepared to deliver the committee's verdict. Harrington and his core team sat on one side of the room, Reynolds and his Obsidian executives on the other. The division seemed symbolic of the fundamental choice before the committee: human judgment enhanced by technology versus technology replacing human operators entirely. Porter cleared his throat and began. After extensive deliberation, considering both the technical performance data and the strategic implications of both approaches, the committee has reached a decision regarding the future direction of American ground combat systems. The room grew impossibly still, every person present acutely aware of the historic significance of this moment. Both Project Sentinel and the Obsidian Initiative have demonstrated significant capabilities and potential advantages, Porter continued. Obsidian's performance in speed, efficiency, and direct combat effectiveness is impressive. Sentinel's tactical adaptation, judgment in complex environments, and minimization of collateral effects are equally noteworthy. He paused, looking first at Reynolds, then at Harrington. Rather than selecting one approach exclusively, the committee has determined that both systems offer valuable capabilities that should be developed further. Murmurs of surprise spread through the room. This wasn't the clear-cut decision either side had anticipated. Specifically, Porter elaborated, the committee recommends continued development of the Sentinel system as our primary crewed ground combat platform, incorporating its innovative human-machine interface and tactical adaptability features. Simultaneously, we will pursue development of Obsidian's autonomous systems for specific mission profiles where removing human operators provides clear tactical advantages. Reynolds leaned forward, clearly displeased with this compromise. General, with respect, this decision undermines the efficiency gains and cost savings that full autonomy offers. Maintaining parallel development tracks dilutes resources and delays implementation. On the contrary, Porter countered, it recognizes that different combat scenarios require different approaches. Sentinel provides superior performance in complex environments requiring human judgment, particularly urban operations and situations with civilian presence. Obsidian offers advantages in high-intensity conventional engagements in reconnaissance operations where speed and direct action are paramount. Reynolds pressed his case. The budgetary implications alone have been considered, Porter interrupted firmly. The committee believes that maintaining human judgment in our primary combat systems is worth the additional investment. Some capabilities cannot be measured purely in dollars and cents, Mr. Reynolds. Harrington remained silent, recognizing that while not a complete victory, this decision preserved the essential element he had fought for, keeping human operators at the core of American armored warfare. The development of autonomous systems was inevitable, but they would complement human warriors rather than replace them entirely. As the meeting concluded and the formal decision was recorded, Porter approached Harrington privately. "You made the difference, Jim. Your demonstration of what experienced human operators bring to the battlefield convinced enough committee members to preserve the crude approach." "And Reynolds?" Porter glanced across the room where Reynolds was engaged in tense conversation with his executives. "He's disappointed, obviously, but quantum defense still gets a significant development contract for the autonomous systems. He'll adapt." "Will he?" Harrington wondered aloud. His vision was always about removing humans from combat entirely. This decision fundamentally rejects that philosophy. "Perhaps," Porter acknowledged, "but the reality of warfare is more nuanced than either pure autonomy or purely human control. The future likely lies in effective integration of both approaches." Later that day, as the Sentinel team gathered to discuss the path forward under the committee's decision, Sarah approached her father. The past 90 days had changed their relationship in subtle but meaningful ways, professional respect gradually thawing the personal distance between them. "The neural interface modifications will need to be standardized for production models," she said, referencing the technical aspects first, her usual approach to difficult conversations. "We should establish a baseline mapping protocol that adapts to individual operators while maintaining core functionality." "Agreed," Harrington replied. "Your work on the adaptive algorithms made the difference in yesterday's demonstration." Sarah nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "I've been offered a permanent position with the project, technical director for the interface systems development." Harrington felt a surge of pride mixed with surprise. "That's excellent news. Your expertise would be invaluable." "I haven't accepted yet," she clarified. "It would mean leaving my research position in Boston, relocating here permanently." "It's your decision," Harrington said carefully, not wanting to pressure her. "Whatever you choose, your contribution to Sentinel has been extraordinary." Sarah studied him for a moment. "Mom would have been proud of what you accomplished here, standing up for something you believe in even when it wasn't popular or convenient." The mention of Elizabeth caught Harrington off guard. They rarely spoke of her, the shared loss still painful after 15 years. "She would have been proud of you," he replied softly. "Your brilliance, your determination." "Maybe she'd be proud of both of us," Sarah suggested. "I've been thinking about what you said, about keeping human judgment in warfare, about responsibility and moral weight. I didn't fully appreciate what that meant until I saw the exercise yesterday, the difference between algorithmic efficiency and true tactical wisdom." Harrington recognized this as the closest they had come to genuine reconciliation in years. "The project would be fortunate to have you," he said simply, "and so would I." Sarah nodded, her expression softening slightly. "I'll let them know tomorrow. Now we should join the others. There's still work to be done if Sentinel is going into production." The next 6 months saw the Sentinel project transition from prototype development to preparation for limited production. The design was refined based on lessons from the evaluation exercise, with improvements to the power systems, armor configuration, and crew interface. Washington supervised the mechanical engineering, ensuring the production model maintained the reliability and field serviceability that had been hallmarks of the prototype. Chen integrated the latest sensor and communication technologies, while Sarah perfected the neural interface that gave Sentinel its unique advantage. Throughout this period, Harrington found himself increasingly in a mentorship role, guiding the next generation of officers who would eventually command Sentinel units in the field. His 40 years of combat experience provided insights no technical manual could convey, lessons about battlefield judgment and the human dimensions of armored warfare that remained relevant despite technological advancement. 1 year after the committee's decision, the first production Sentinel rolled off the assembly line at a facility in Michigan. Designated the M1070 Sentinel Ground Combat System, it represented the culmination of the team's vision, a combat vehicle that preserved the essential human element while incorporating the best available technology. Harrington was present for the ceremony, standing proudly with Washington, Chen, Winters, and Sarah as the vehicle was formally presented to the Army. General Porter, recently promoted to Army Chief of Staff, delivered remarks emphasizing how Sentinel represented a new philosophy in combat systems development, one that respected the irreplaceable value of human judgment while embracing technological enhancement. As the ceremony concluded, Porter joined Harrington for a private moment beside the new Sentinel. Quite a journey from that first day at Fort Hood, he observed. From near retirement to this, Harrington agreed. Not what I expected for my final mission. About that, Porter said with a slight smile, the Secretary has a proposal for you. The Army is establishing a new Armored Warfare Doctrine Center focused on integrating crewed and autonomous systems in future conflicts. They need a director with both combat experience and understanding of next-generation technology. Harrington raised an eyebrow. I thought my active service was concluding. Technically, yes, this would be a civilian appointment, but with full authority over doctrine development and training programs. You'd be shaping how these vehicles are actually used in combat, ensuring the lessons of your generation aren't lost as technology evolves. The offer was unexpected, but immediately appealing. It would allow Harrington to continue influencing the future of armored warfare, preserving the human warrior ethos he had fought to protect. I'd be honored, he said simply. 6 months later, the newly established Armored Warfare Doctrine Center at Fort Benning hosted its first class of officers selected for Sentinel Command. Harrington stood before them in the lecture hall, no longer in uniform, but carrying the same authority that had defined his military career. The vehicle you will command represents a new approach to armored warfare, he began. Not merely a weapon system, but a partnership between human judgment and technological capability. Your most important qualification isn't technical expertise, though that matters. It's your capacity for decision-making under the most challenging conditions imaginable. He activated a display showing combat footage from various conflicts, highlighting moments where human judgment had proven decisive. These are the situations no algorithm can fully anticipate, where experience, intuition, and moral clarity make the difference between success and failure, between civilian casualties and precision effects. As he continued the lecture, Harrington noticed Washington, Chen, and Sarah quietly entering the back of the hall. They had come to witness this moment, the beginning of Sentinel's operational legacy. Their presence reminded him of how far they had come from those desperate 90 days when the future of American armored warfare hung in the balance. Later, the four of them gathered in Harrington's office, reminiscing about the project that had brought them together and discussing its evolution since production began. Reynolds has adapted surprisingly well, Chen noted. Quantum defense is thriving with the autonomous systems contract, even if it's not the complete replacement of human operators he envisioned. He's a businessman first, Washington observed. The profit margins on specialized autonomous systems are actually higher than full replacement would have been. He'll take the win. And the technology keeps advancing, Sarah added. The latest neural interface improvements have reduced operator training time by almost 40%. Experienced tank commanders can transition to Sentinel with minimal adjustment period. Harrington listened with satisfaction. The program they had fought for was succeeding, preserving the human element in warfare while embracing technological advancement. It represented the balance he had championed from the beginning. There's something I wanted to show you, he said, retrieving a framed document from his desk. It was the first page of his journal from the Sentinel project, containing the quote he had written at the very beginning. Not the weapon that decides victory, but the warrior who wields it. Beneath it, he had added a new line. The warrior's greatest weapon has always been wisdom. Technology can enhance it, but never replace it. That's going on the wall of every Sentinel training facility, Washington said approvingly. Reminds them what it's all about. As evening approached, they moved their gathering to the observation deck overlooking the training grounds. In the distance, several Sentinel units conducted maneuvers, their low profiles moving with precision across the terrain. The sunset painted them in gold and shadow, a fitting metaphor for the twilight of one era of warfare and the dawn of another. We did good work, Harrington said quietly. Work that matters. Not just good work, Sarah replied, standing beside her father. We preserved something essential. The understanding that warfare, no matter how technologically advanced, remains fundamentally human. That responsibility can't be delegated to algorithms or artificial intelligence. Harrington nodded, feeling a profound sense of completion. Throughout his 40-year career, he had witnessed the evolution of armored warfare through multiple generations of technology. But the constant had always been the men and women who made the difficult decisions, who carried the moral weight of combat, who understood the true cost of victory and defeat. In the Sentinel, that tradition would continue, enhanced by technology but guided by human judgment, adapted for modern battlefield realities but honoring the timeless principles of the warrior ethos. A legacy not just of machines but of the human spirit that gives them purpose and meaning. As darkness fell and the training exercises concluded, Harrington remained on the observation deck, watching as the Sentinel units returned to their assembly areas. Their crews would dismount, perhaps share stories of the day's challenges, pass on lessons learned to newer operators. The cycle of experience and wisdom that had defined military service since the earliest days of warfare, continuing despite the technological revolution transforming the battlefield. In that moment, Harrington knew with certainty that he had fulfilled his final mission, not just saving tanks from extinction, but ensuring that the soul of armored warfare, the human judgment at its core, would endure for generations to come. The deadliest machine would always be the human mind. Everything else was just a tool in its service.